You wake before the bells, while the ridge is still wrapped in a thin mist that blurs rooflines and turns chimney pots into pale smudges. The window is small and slightly wavy, and the air that slips through the sash smells of damp stone and last night's smoke. You sit up slowly, because calm deserves an unhurried beginning, and press your palms together to warm them. A board gives a discreet creak. A coal offers one final crackle in the grate. You listen until the room agrees to be quiet again. Your hands meet as if greeting each other after a small absence. Fingers fold and ease apart. Thumb meets thumb, light as a nod. The web between forefinger and thumb rests for the blink of a blink against a partner who is not yet there. You keep the pressure gentle and the timing patient, and you give the pause after most important of all the easy length of someone thinking about breakfast. You do it again, steady as breathing, until the gesture becomes unremarkable. You cross to the window and lift the latch. Coolness pours in like water from a careful jug. Far down the slope of the street a woman passes with a pail, and the sound of her step disappears into a close. A cat stretches along a sill, and then decides that is enough length for one cat. Somewhere, a bell ringer tests a note that did not require testing and still insists. Your breath fogs the glass with a small ghost you do not wipe away. Hands touch, separate, return to idleness like a sentence learned by heart. Breakfast asks nothing complicated. You break an oatcake into steady bites, the grain a little sweet, a little dry, sturdy enough to keep company with quiet. Crumbs dust your fingers, and you let that be part of the morning. It gives your hands a simple task before they perform the other one. You dress with deliberate, forgettable care. Stockings pulled, laces tied, coat brushed. You take your gloves but carry them rather than wear them, because bare hands are honest and the air does not argue. The stair twists downward, stone cool under your palm. The turn familiar enough to count. The close opens, and the long spine of the street gathers itself. Roofs and gables knit together. Chimneys stand like blunt pencils. A porter rolls a cask with the slow dignity casks prefer. You nod to him, because nodding is the oil that keeps everything easy. You think of halls and clubs and guild rooms where, for a very long time, people have adopted small signs that say, "I am with you," without exhausting their breath. You are not in a hall or a club. You are simply in the street between breakfast and the first task of the day. Calm hands do better work. You shape the gesture again. Little finger relaxed, ring finger mild, middle finger silent, forefinger steady, thumb companionable. Contact is brief. The pause is the signal. The release is the courtesy. Memory settles in your muscles like a tune you can hum even when you cannot say where you learned it. The mist thins by halves. A watchman passes at a pace that is neither slow nor fast and taps his cudgel once to remind the street that order has a sound. A baker crosses with a tray and the careful solemnity of someone entrusted with mourning. A coat you know appears at the edge of your vision and, being well-mannered, does not hurry. The face above it is simply a mourning face, not a secret face. You meet where the plank across the gutter makes crossing almost polite. You exchange a greeting seasoned with nothing in particular. Your hands follow the words as if by accident. Thumb meets thumb with the softest pressure. Webs rest for the blink of a blink. Fingers trace a shallow curve meaning, "I am fine. You are fine." Then the hands are only hands again, and that is the beauty of it. The hold takes less time than a raindrop needs to choose a direction on a sill. Your friend inclines the head as if the plank is interesting. You incline yours as if you agree. Then you both continue, changed only by the neatness of a small promise kept. You walk on and let the street have you back. You are not sure whether the mist lifts or whether you have learned its grammar. Stones that know your step make polite adjustments. A bookseller opens his stall. Your fingers trail across a pamphlet title you read without reading. The printer's boy shoulders a bundle of damp sheets and does not drop them. A fiddler warms a reel beside a doorway simply to prove that it is still a reel. It is. You let the tune pass through you as if you were a wall that happens to enjoy music. Your friend is already elsewhere doing ordinary things, which is all that needs doing. The sign, placed and passed, continues working without attention. You think about signs in general and how people like to make them. A tap on a snuff box lid, a certain way of lifting a hat brim, A fingernail wrapping twice on a pewter cup, tiny manners that tidy up the day. Mainstream historical fact. Edinburgh's old town in the 18th century ran along a ridge of narrow closes and wynds off the Royal Mile, with tall tenements, kirks like St. Giles, and bells that measured the hours, quirky or fringe tidbit. Many townspeople carried small snuff boxes or mulls and indulged in quiet rituals of tapping and offering, which double as graceful signals if you like graceful signals. Historians still argue whether friendly grips and taps in everyday circles echoed older guild customs, borrowed quietly from lodge rooms, or arose as nothing more complicated than convenient habits useful in narrow streets. You let the bell finish whatever it has to say. The cat stops being longer and becomes sensible again. The baker's tray returns empty. Your hands are your hands again, which was always the point. Your pace is deliberate without insisting on itself. Morning spreads like a cloth on a table, and everything important can be arranged with fingertips and patience. You keep the tune of your breath. A promise offered, accepted, and released lingers in the air, like the aftertaste of grain. Nothing dramatic has happened, which is an excellent beginning. The day opens like a pocketbook, and you place inside it one neat folded sign that simply says, "Enough." You turn back to the small table by the window, where a plate waits without asking for attention. The oatcake is round and a little uneven at the edge, the surface mapped with fine cracks that remember heat. You lift it and feel a pleasant dryness on your fingertips, the sort that invites butter but does not insist. The window admits a cautious light that prefers to observe rather than announce. It lays itself along the table and behaves. You breathe and allow the breath to travel through your hands. Thumb to thumb, a light press, the slightest tilt of the wrist, then the pause that is the real conversation. Your fingers learn that gentleness is not weakness. It is a measured use of strength. You set the oatcake down, press again, and release as gradually as the last thread of warmth leaving a coal. The kettle lid clicks as if clearing its throat. You pour hot water over leaves with the steady care a street porter gives a cask. The cup warms your palms. You let the heat travel into your fingers and back again. You shape the small press and release as if answering a question that needs kindness more than speed. When you bring the cup to your lips, steam passes your cheek like a polite visitor who knows when to leave. Outside, a barrow wheel complains down the slope. The room's quiet helps your hands remember their lesson. You open and close them with patient rhythm, as though testing hinges on a door that has no need to swing. You think about how a sign earns its usefulness by being ordinary. It can hide beneath buying a taper, borrowing a book, or admiring a cobbler's stitching. It tucks itself into the meeting and parting of friends so easily that only the participants are warmed by it, like two embers sharing a flame in the grate. You take another bite. The grainy edge gives way, and the taste is honest oats, a thread of smoke, a mild sweetness from yesterday's fire. You press thumb to thumb again, now with a softness that lets the bones sit comfortably. You add a slight curl at the end, hardly more than a suggestion, and then forget that you added it, so that you will remember it without remembering you rehearsed. Calm is repetition that never boasts about having repeated. A bell somewhere wonders aloud whether to begin and finally decides it will. Across the way, a window opens on its leather strap. A woman shakes a cloth once, and the cloth understands. The sound folds neatly into the street, noises the watchman's single tap, the first barber's door bolt lifted, a short reel tested by a fiddler, because reels ask for attention even when no one is ready to dance. You keep your own rhythm, which needs no audience. The oatcake allows another unhurried bite. The cup contributes warmth, dependable and clear-minded. You rub your fingers to call back the feeling of contact. It is the skin's way of holding a thought, where the mind might drop it. You lay out the timing again, greeting, press, pause, release. You leave more air in the pause than before. A good sign behaves like a sentence with excellent punctuation. It gives the other person space to breathe the meaning. Your thumbs meet and part with deliberate mildness, and the pause lands cleanly like a foot on a well-set stair. Mainstream historical fact. In 18th century Edinburgh, oatcakes were baked on an iron girdle over the hearth or bought from street sellers, then cooled and stored on wall pegs or in cloth-lined tins, a plain staple often taken with butter, cheese, or small ale at breakfast. quirky or fringe tidbit. Some cooks kept a smooth girdle stone by the fire and rubbed it for luck before turning the cakes, or traced a tiny cross with the handle to coax a clean lift from the iron. Historians still argue whether friendly little grips and timed presses among neighbors echoed fraternal lodge habits drifting into daily life, or simply arose as convenient manners in crowded closes. You spread a little butter with the back of your knife, and it yields without protest. The pale gloss catches the light like a small pond. You fold the oatcake half over and take the neatest bite you can manage, because neatness keeps crumbs from becoming a story. You set the knife down and allow your fingers to rest on the table, warm, idle, ready. The gesture waits at the edge of your hands like a mild yawn permitted at the perfect moment. You review the feel of linen over knuckle, because later you may wear gloves and will need to speak through them. A handshake, pressed through soft leather, must trust the pause more than the pressure. You test it with the napkin loosely folded, and the cloth reveals the right amount of distance. You think about the difference between a sign that shows off and a sign that disappears. You prefer the disappearing kind. It lets the day keep its ordinary face. Steam thins at the lip of your cup. The light chooses to be a little braver and trespasses a finger's width across the floorboards. You order your pocket's kerchief, small coins, a folded note with nothing urgent in it, and smooth the front of your coat the way someone might smooth a sheet for a guest who is only themselves. Your hands fall naturally to your sides, and the gesture settles there too, quiet as a well-behaved bird on a sill. You do not need to think of it again until the street asks for it. You rinse the cup, not as a task to be endured, but as punctuation at the end of a calm paragraph. When you set it to dry, your fingers find each other one more time and repeat the press, the pause, the release. The pause is slightly longer now, composed, confident, and kind. At the window, you rest your palm on the cool, wavy glass. Your breath leaves a brief cloud and then becomes ordinary air again. Across the street, a hat crosses a doorway and vanishes. When you turn toward the stair, the gesture is finished with rehearsal and has become part of walking. You descend among the familiar turns, neither eager nor reluctant. The close gathers the day into itself, and you join it as calmly as a spoon entering a bowl. A press will happen when the time is right, in the unremarkable space between two words that never needed to be spoken aloud. The morning has arranged you. The wind receives you with a cool breath that smells of damp stone and leather, the kind of air that minds its own business. Light arrives in narrow pieces between gables and chimney stacks, lays a pale ladder on the wall, and finds the cobbler's doorway as if invited. A modest scrap of hide hangs at the lintel. You pause by the bench and consider its orderly citizens. All's in their drilled block. Wooden lasts in a shy row. A lapstone dark as tea. Seam rags. Small knives like thin moons. And a little pot where wax remembers its duty. The bench itself is polished by forearms and conversation. It has learned to keep secrets in plain sight. Your friend stands with sleeves pinned back, fingers glossed by wax, and the steadiness of someone who lets the work decide the pace. He lifts a shoe to the last and rocks it once, the smallest boat testing a private tide. Morning, he says, not to announce a fact, but to include you in an arrangement already going well. You answer at the same calm height and lay your glove on the bench where it will not try to be interesting. The awl opens the upper with a tidy point. The bristle follows with the patience of a river. Nothing hurries, and nothing needs to. You talk about soles because soles are public, polite, and safe for passing ears. The heel has thinned to a neat crescent. The toe shows a pebbled field where the street keeps its arithmetic. He nods at the evidence and touches the last with his thumb, as if reminding wood it is responsible for foot. Your hand rests on the bench. His reaches for the waxed end, and for the space of a quiet breath your hands stop pretending to be busy. Thumb to thumb, the softest pressure fingers suggest a shallow curve, and the pause says the useful part. Release follows like an exhale. Then you lean a little nearer to the leather, because leather makes a very patient audience. No one notices, because there is nothing to notice. The awl resumes its small declarations. The bristle glides, laying down a seam that looks like patience translated into line. You ask the price of a patch, not because you do not know it, but because numbers like to be acknowledged in public. He answers with coins that have behaved themselves for years. You nod in a way that blesses arithmetic and keeps the talk properly dressed. Your glove gathers a modest bloom of dust. You let it be, because ordinary dust is part of the uniform of a shared morning. The string in the wax pot shines as if it has remembered something pleasant. He draws it out and warms it between thumb and forefinger until the wax obeys again. The smell is homely resin, tallow, a whisper of smoke, and goes about the wind greeting other smells. Wet stone, last night's beer someone meant to carry farther, and a hint of grain from a sack that refuses a neat knot. He marries bristle to thread with the neatness of folding a letter, sets 3 careful stitches, and rests the shoe a moment on the bench, as if reminding it that shoes are expected to be agreeable. You propose a slow turn through the market later. The awl pauses the width of a heartbeat and then continues, which counts as a whole sentence. He mentions a fiddler who favors a reel near the corner where the wind pours itself into the broader street, and you both agree without mentioning agreement. Hands return to their ordinary lives. The small sign keeps working under everything. The way yeast works in dough or a banked coal keeps a hearth honest busy while pretending to nap. A boy passes with a tray of heel lifts held out like an offering, face solemn with the importance of not losing anything small. He nods to you, to the bench, to the general project of mourning. You salute with a fingertip to your brim. That could mean 30 different things, and therefore means none. Which is safest? A woman looks in with boots that remember rain too fondly. She is promised an afternoon. The awl adjusts its tune to include another story. The wax leaves a modest shine where the seam prefers approval. You test your soul against the floorboard, and let the wood tell you what you already knew. You will need a patch, though not this hour. He trims a thread with a knife thin as a new moon and passes you the shoe. In that transfer, there is room for a second greeting, the kind that enjoys restraint. Thumb to thumb, a pause the length of a sip, and a release that bows in miniature. The line between business and attention stays comfortable and free of edges. He smiles without decoration and returns to the last, where leather becomes obedient under patience. A gull skews its cry along the narrow wedge of sky and abandons it generously. The wind collects sounds the way a careful woman collects pins. The soft complaint of a pulley overhead, the roll of a little cask, a cough that changes its mind. You and your friend consider laces, their tips stiffened with wax into tidy tongues, and decide they are best when quiet. He oils a seam with a trusted rag. The leather darkens agreeably and forgives the day for whatever the day will ask. You ask after his mother's joints, because joints report the weather more faithfully than any bell. He says she keeps a system, a spoon of broth at noon, a footstool at 3, and a page of psalms whenever the wind shows off. You say the wind can be educated. He says the wind prefers self-study. Between these reasonable philosophies, your hands rest like citizens who know the charter by feel. The awl pricks. The thread sings a dry, contented note. The last holds the shoe the way a friend holds a story securely, without fuss. At the lintel, a small red-stemmed sprig has made itself at home. He taps the wood when he steps outside for air. You mirror the touch, because mirroring is politeness in its softest coat. A cart brushes the mouth of the wind and leaves a brief sentence of sawdust. You read it and find it simply says cart, which suits the morning's appetite for plot. Business settles itself. A coin knows where to be. The promise of later picks its usual corner. The shoe finds your foot and forgets it was ever separate. You draw your glove back on and test the memory through leather thumb to thumb. The smallest possible pressure, a pause that does the talking while the glove enjoys being a glove. Satisfied, you let the habit sink until it is no more remarkable than standing upright. You step into the strip of light the wind allows and breathe the difference between shade and almost sun. At the far end, a watchman taps once to see if the air is listening. The air hears and does not comment. Your friend lifts a spare heel lift as if to measure the day. You agree it looks correct. Thanks are given without ceremony, and you let the street collect you again. The market is already awake when you arrive, breathing in a steady hum that asks nothing dramatic of anyone. Barrows lean at sensible angles. Stallboards creak as if clearing their throats. Voices unwrap the same dependable prices they have unwrapped all week. Cabbages hold the front line round, deliberate, beaded with dew like quiet metals. Turnips gather in mild ranks. Carrots arrange themselves into optimistic pyramids. The air tastes of damp sackcloth and a respectable amount of fish, which is precisely the right amount for a morning that intends to get things done. You pull on your knitted mittens because the air proposes formality, and you accept. Wool teaches fingers to behave. The pattern crosses your knuckles in modest diamonds, a patient geometry worked by someone who knew how to keep time with a needle. The yarn remembers soap and a good fire. Thumb to thumb, you rub once to wake the nap, again to wake the habit. The language of today will be the language of pressure and timing, and the pause that does most of the talking while pretending not to. The stallholder greets you with the cheer of a man still on friendly terms with morning. His apron has been debating flour since dawn, and appears to be winning. He invites you to admire his cabbages, which accommodate admiration without any visible strain. You lift one and feel its compact seriousness, the cool heft of a leaf that learned to be a sphere. Your friend drifts beside you, not so much arriving as aligning, and together you regard vegetables with the earnest concentration usually reserved for weather. You ask the price. Your friend asks whether the rain intends courtesy or theater. The stallholder, who holds a senior chair in the study of precipitation, says the rain will do as it pleases and charge nothing for the privilege. This satisfies everyone. While the words conduct their respectable business, your mitten finds your friend's mitten on the edge of the stall, as naturally as two apples choosing the same hollow in a basket. The pressure is small, a soft settling at the base of the thumbs, then the lightest forward slide along the line of the fingers, a breath-long pause, and an unremarkable release. Wool softens everything. Inside the mittens, your fingers keep a gentle curl. Straight fingers look like arguments, and this is not an argumentative morning. Your eyes continue to do their duty to the cabbages. You set one down and lift another that has mastered the art of roundness without becoming vain. Your friend inspects a turnip by its roots, returns it to its companions, and the turnip accepts being returned as the natural conclusion of its career in your hands. Farther along, a fishmonger raises a herring that has never forgotten how to be silver and announces that the sea remains honest. You nod at the principle without entering theology. A girl passes with leek tops gathered like a bouquet. The leeks are flattered and behave. A dog patrols the perimeter with the authority of an official lacking paperwork. It approves everyone, though it keeps a private file on geese. A peddler rattles a tray of pins that sound like tidy rain. The market knits these noises into a single cloth and lays it over the hour. Cheese rests on a board with the composure of a citizen who pays rates on time. The stallholder cuts a careful slice and offers it on the tip of a knife that knows how to be considerate. You taste. The flavor is a field remembered without speeches. Your friend tastes and nods with a seriousness that flatters both cheese and mourning. Under the shelter of this polite ceremony, your mittens meet once more, this time a diagonal drift toward the base of the little finger. Then the stillness that says the part words cannot say, in the same gentle unhooking as before. You consider buying something and decide to continue considering, which is a respectable occupation in markets. A boy offers to carry your purchases. You pay him with compliments on his hat, which cost you nothing, and please him as much as copper. He bows to the profession of hats and goes in search of burdens that wish to be carried. A woman and a tower of eggs negotiate a truce without raising their voices. Cloth merchants unfurl sober browns, with the dignity of clouds auditioning for afternoon. Somewhere, a fiddler warms a reel simply to prove that reels remain warm. You speak of wind because wind likes to be consulted. You and your friend remark on the pale way light slides down the lane, late and untroubled, as if keeping an appointment with itself. A cart changes its mind, performs a thoughtful reverse, and receives a tiny cheer for bravery from nobody in particular. In that gentle confusion, you pass a cabbage to your friend, who passes it back, and the exchange becomes a second greeting disguised as indecision, mitten to mitten, wrist to wrist, the smallest inward turn, a pause filled to a sensible level, and release. The cabbages remain admirably neutral. Onions arrive with the gravity onions deserve. Your friend buys a small bag for reasons that will explain themselves to a pan later. You invest in two apples that insist on being a pear. Coins behave with a competent clink. At the mouth of the lane, a watchman taps his cudgel once. The sound remembers its duty and continues along the stones as if reviewing them. You set your breathing to that measure and find it an acceptable rhythm for thought that prefers to walk. At the next stall, the carrots have arranged themselves according to private criteria. Your mitten rests on the board as if it has never done anything else. Your friend asks, "Do you think this one looks industrious?" The carrot keeps its counsel. It may have a rich inner life. It is more likely a carrot. You agree to let it continue whatever it is doing. Behind you, a vendor explains the virtues of salt, which are many. Beside her, a basket learns the meaning of usefulness by being filled. Another greeting hides neatly inside the return of small change. Your friend's mitten folds 2 coins into your palm and lingers for the space of a single breath. The pause matches the distant bell that chooses to toll once and be done with it, and the hour agrees to claim the gesture as its own. You nod as if in answer to arithmetic, and the coins go where coins have always gone, obedient as sleepers. You buy nothing more, which is also a kind of purchase. The market pays you in names that will be pleasant to remember, and in dignified noises you can keep for later. The cabbages approve your restraint. The stallholder wishes your soup good fortune whether it exists yet or not, which is generous. Your friend settles the onions into a comfortable democracy over one wrist and studies the sky with suitable professionalism. You tidy your mittens with a last private press thumb to thumb, whispering pressure through wool. The courteous pause, the easy release, and let the gesture fade back into muscle memory where it prefers to live. You step aside to permit the formerly indecisive cart its second opinion. The driver lifts 2 fingers in a salute. You return 2 in the belief that salutations improve with circulation. The lane stretches toward the wider street like a sentence ready for a comma. You and your friend walk at a pace appropriate to punctuation. Passing the first stall again, you touch the rim of a basket, purely to persuade your hands to mind the ordinary, and the ordinary obeys with enthusiasm. You leave with 2 apples for you, a small bag of onions for your friend, and a pocket quietly heavier with calm. The hum of the place folds itself up and tucks into the day. Wool keeps your fingers sensible. The air keeps its mild edge. Your breath adopts the rhythm of feet on stone. Behind you, the cabbages continue practicing roundness, which they have nearly perfected. Ahead, the street draws a pale line of light and holds no opinion. You accept the street's lack of opinion and proceed, hands easy, timing easy. The pause you both agreed upon traveling with you like a small, polite lantern. The bookstall is a corner more than a shop, a thoughtful angle where the street pauses and lets paper speak softly. Boards rest across barrels with the confidence only barrels possess. Pamphlets and stitched booklets lie in careful disorder, their corners lifting as the breeze thinks about turning pages for you. The smell is unmistakable ink, damp wool, starch, and a faint citrus note where someone wiped the counter with more optimism than cloth. You stand at the edge with patient hands and an expression that assures every title you will not rush it. The bookseller greets you with a nod that barely stirs his spectacles. He is a man arranged by shelves, ink snug in the cuticles, faint type pricks along the thumb, a dusting of grit where paper remembers being rag. He draws a pamphlet from the middle with the delicacy of someone rescuing a letter from between friends. The sheet has a good tooth. The type sits slightly deep, as if the words lean forward while being made. He offers it over the frontier of air, and you accept with both hands, because paper appreciates ceremony. Your friend arrives from the right the way a margin appears beside a line. She pretends to be absorbed by a woodcut of a comet leaning over a town that looks properly ashamed. The bookseller discusses price in a voice that believes numbers calm down when spoken aloud. You follow his figures with a composed nod and regard the deckled edge as though it contains a small map. Between these respectable motions, your hands perform their quiet task. Thumb to thumb, no more pressure than trust, then the smallest tilt inward, a breath-long pause, and an unremarkable release that gives the moment back to paper. You keep one corner of the pamphlet and let your friend keep the other, as though both of you are weighing truth against meter. Paper obliges by being a bridge. Under that bridge, the familiar clasp happens and vanishes, leaving behind nothing but the practical look of 2 readers pretending to judge a woodcut's clouds. The bookseller, who has seen every way people try to appear learned in front of print, chooses benevolence as policy and begins to list other titles you might admire. You answer gravely that you are open to improvement, provided improvement is not in a hurry. A draft rearranges the top layer into a small argument with itself. Woodcuts decide whether horses should be permitted to smile. A sermon practices sternness under its breath. A jest book, having no manners, peeks from beneath a legal tract like a child under a tablecloth. You flatten the pile with a gentle palm. The movement is ordinary. The contact is extra. The pause is shaded just enough to be invisible to anyone not invited. When your hand lifts, everything looks as it did, which is exactly the point. Coins make their measured journey from your pocket to the board. They are counted with respect, like a congregation standing for a psalm. The bookseller wraps the pamphlet in a square of last month's news that still believes it is urgent. Pace tightens at the fold. Twine remembers how to be a line. He passes the parcel to you. Your friend tests the knot like a seamstress testing a stitch fingertip shaping. A quiet breath held. A quiet breath released. In that testing, one more greeting happens in miniature. The mildest pressure, the soft pause that says yes, and the neat unhooking that leaves only twine to admire. You drift to the stall's shadowed end, where uncollected subscriptions doze in a calm, leaning stack. The boards here are cooler. The ink smell is thicker, polite but certain. An empty type box sits open, its tiny apartments neat as a town between occupations. You trail a finger along the lip and note the faint burr where ink has bitten, the small swell where gatherings meet, the soft crackle when a pile is straightened. It is a good sound for people who like promises that never raise their voices. A boy returns with a bundle of damp sheets from the press, edges fanning like the gills of a thoughtful fish. He sets them down carefully and is rewarded with a compact lecture on gravity's habits. You step aside, letting the stall reorganize itself around the new arrival. Your friend hides a smile in the woodcut tray, where a heroic figure slays something adequately symbolic. You consider the courage of slaying symbolic things and decide it is best left to paper, which is brave, cheap, and quick to forgive. Behind you, an opinion about roads and rates is pulled off a coil in measured lengths. You let it pass your ears the way a stream passes a stone, wetting without moving. The bookseller recommends a thin quarto on local improvements with a tenderness that would flatter a person. You hold it and feel the swell of gatherings beneath the cover. The stitching suggests the printer had a tidy soul and clean hands when it mattered. While you pretend to consider, your friend returns the woodcut to its tray, and in returning it, lets her fingers brush yours with the exact gravity of a reader putting a page to bed. You pay for the quarto. The bookseller counts again because numbers enjoy rehearsal. He lowers his voice to confess a misprint, already corrected in spirit, if not in type. You accept the apology on behalf of all pages, and place the purchase with the care you reserve for bread. Your friend asks whether more ballads with futures in them are expected. Ballads, the bookseller says, always have futures. That is how they avoid being wrong. It is a theory you choose not to contradict. At the threshold, light nudges the stall like an early guest who has brought nothing but good manners. You and your friend step out into the street's cool mixture of peat and stone. The parcel string settles into your palm with the amiable bite of serviceable twine. You try the small grip once more around the package's corner thumb to thumb. A sheltered pause, the release that belongs to letting go of paper. Your friend adjusts her cuff in the same rhythm. To anyone else, cuffs have been adjusted. To you, the day has agreed to continue. You move along the boards in a slow tide, pausing to admire the serious face of a map that suspects the world might fit inside its borders if only the sea would cooperate. Voices keep their patient commerce. Worth and weight, prayer and joke, promise and price. The air warms a degree and then thinks better of it. You lift the parcel to your nose, because fresh ink knows how to be both new and steady. It is the right sort of certainty, the sort that asks for no applause. The street resumes around you with the contentment of a book that closes itself gently. You tuck the pamphlets away, let your hands be ordinary again, and keep the memory of the pause in the place where useful tools live quiet, ready, respectful of the pocket that shelters them. Behind you, the bookstall returns to its debates about comets, roads, and the moral condition of horses. You leave it to its papers. Ahead, the hour folds open like a fresh page, and your fingers rest, unremarkable and prepared, as if the margin itself were glad to have you. The kirkyard wall offers a long, low shoulder to lean on, a sober run of stone that has been practicing quiet for centuries. You find the flattest place with the palm of your hand, and let the grain tell you its small, sandy story. Lichen settles in pale coins that never buy anything, thrifty and content. Beyond the wall, the grass looks freshly persuaded by a scythe used at a very reasonable hour. Letters on the nearest stones have softened, not from neglect, but from weather's steady handwriting. A slow script the eye can read without sounding the words. The air along the wall is cooler than the lane, as if the stone keeps a private store of mourning. The lane outside moves at a considerate pace. Wheels turn without insisting on being noticed. Feet pass and then forget they have passed. A bell in a nearby tower tries one clear note, decides it did well enough, and rests. You adjust your coat where it meets the wall, not for show, only to keep fabric and stone on cordial terms. Beneath your fingers, the mortar is gritty and honest. You set your hat at a tilt that suits the light, and remember that brims are excellent curtains for respectable business that prefers the shade. A familiar figure crosses the gate, not so much entering as rejoining a conversation the place keeps, whether anyone attends it or not. The gate is known to you, a fraction of caution at the heel, a courtesy to gravel that remembers last week's damp. You let your weight settle a little more fully on the wall, and offer your attention with the same untroubled generosity the stones offer theirs. Crows inspect the far yews with the magisterial air of officials who never carry papers. They approve of everything they notice and are tireless in noticing. Your friend draws near along the path paved with obedient grit. A nod is traded, the sober sort that recognizes friendship, without waking anyone who might be resting in the late morning. You keep your hands idle where anyone could see them, and let the brim of your hat provide a private room. In its shadow, your right wrist turns inward a finger's breadth, meets the calm resistance of your friend's wrist, turning to meet it, and rests there for the length of a single, ordinary breath. The pause is the part that speaks. The release is the courtesy that follows. When your hands return to the daylight, they look like hands again, polite, unoccupied, correct. No one is surprised because nothing has happened. A gardener lifts a basket of clippings and relocates it 3 steps, thoroughly improving its situation. A boy trailing a string pauses to educate a pebble about being a boat, which the pebble accepts with grave cooperation. You note the curve of a carved scroll on a slab and smooth it with a fingertip that behaves itself. The air at the wall's height lingers, a cool ribbon that minds its own errands. You give your coat an extra inch of order and find that order grateful to be found. Your friend admires a hawthorn that has decided to bloom modestly. The blossoms inhabit their branch with a kind of confidence that does not require compliments. You mention the tree has chosen its place well, halfway between sunlight and sensible restraint. Your friend suggests the tree has been reading proofs for the weather and found no errors to correct. Between these learned remarks, your fingers rest along the brim, travel the felt's edge, and return as slowly as a bookmark. No one could accuse a bookmark of haste. No one accuses your fingers either. A watchman moves along the outer lane, his pace agreeable to both boots and duty. The cudgel taps once against the paving to prove that wood and stone still understand each other. The sound arrives at the wall, reduced to a kind of punctuation you can place anywhere in the sentence of your breathing. You and your friend let your breath adopt it, and then set it down again, the way a reader takes a comma and releases it. Pebbles underfoot shift in small, forgiving ways, and then pretend not to have moved at all. You speak of an errand that may be done today or tomorrow without insulting either. Your friend says tomorrow will be tolerant of the delay. A bee discovers the hawthorn and writes its blunt script from flower to flower, uninterested in the finer points of human scheduling. A breeze stirs the lichen into a thought of travel it does not intend to realize. You use the motion to adjust your hat once more, wrist turning inward beneath the brim, a shy echo of the first exchange. The pause takes the measure of a breath, and an extra half heartbeat, satisfied to be understood only by the two who offered and received it. Clouds rehearse the art of being significant. and then, kindly, decide to remain simply clouds. Their shade crosses stones and grass without arguing. Names appear and relax, as the light edits itself with good manners. You do not read more than a line, because lines are sufficient, and the day favors brevity in inscriptions. Your friend traces a smooth edge and steps back in agreement with the general thesis that everything here has already been persuaded of its meaning. Two older men share a bench under the yews and maintain an important silence that has lasted, by the look of it, for several years. They acknowledge you without threatening their record. A woman in a plain shawl sets a small posy by a stone and straightens the ribbon once, to show she has considered both gravity and grace. Grasshopper sounds click somewhere close to the ground, proving that small instruments carry well in open air. You consider the skilled economy of such a sound, and decide it has mastered the craft of being enough. The wall is at your shoulder, and does not mind being treated as a companion. Your palm lifts, returns, and rests on the cool face, inviting your breath to match the stone's even temper. Your friend stands close enough to share the shelter of your brim without trespass. In that shade, a third quiet turn of the wrist is exchanged, no more decisive than a thought that chooses to remain a thought. The pause is very slightly longer, but only because the day, like the stone, has all the time it needs. When your hands part, they do so with the practiced ease of tools returned to their places. You review, without appearing to review, the simple proprieties that make the sign behave. No emphasis, no flourish, only timing and consent, and the courtesy of returning hands to their occupations before anyone imagines they were elsewhere. Your occupations are modest. One of you folds a kerchief, the other traces a chiseled serif, as if approving the mason's vowel. It is possible to be usefully busy in a way that leaves the air completely undisturbed, and the air is grateful for the example. A faint scent of peat rides the breeze from the town, softened by grass and stone into something almost botanical. It meets the cooler note of iron from the gate and the warm wooden smell of the gardener's basket. The combination behaves like a sentence in 3 agreeable clauses. Your stomach offers a tactful suggestion about noon. The bell obliges with a rehearsal stroke, and then, apparently satisfied with rehearsal, postpones a full performance. You and your friend take a few steps together along the wall's line, not to arrive anywhere, only to accept the invitation of level ground. Gravel shifts with the tact of a servant who knows the family well. The hinge murmurs when a visitor leans in to read a date. The date proves unstartling and permits the hinge to rest. You pause where sun and shade divide the path with the neatness of a well-cut seam. Under cover of a last adjustment of your hat, the smallest turn and pause complete the message meant for exactly 2, and then the felt is only felt again. You part at the gate because gates are ideal for parting. Your friend chooses the lane that keeps company with shop fronts. You choose the pavement that prefers the smell of cloth to the smell of fish. The wall remains behind, continuing its reliable career of not needing to be thanked. The crows consider another opinion, and then keep the one they already held. Your hands return to their daylight selves, polite and harmless, with a memory tucked neatly where gloves would be if gloves were required. You carry the ordinary in the ordinary way, and let it be the whole point. The kirkyard receives the next visitor with the same economy of welcome, and you allow the street to collect you, stone giving way to step, step giving way to errand, errand giving way to the agreeable space between errands. What needed saying has been said without words. What needed remembering has arranged itself into muscle and rhythm and the useful length of a breath. You do not hurry. You let the day keep its proper scale. Ahead, the light looks neither certain nor doubtful, which is exactly the expression you prefer for the afternoon. The tailor's shop receives you with warmth that feels like attentiveness rather than heat-pressed wool, chalk dust, and a sweeter note of beeswax rubbed into thread. The door settles with a careful click that refuses to hurry anyone. Light from a tall window rests on bolts, arranged like sensible arguments. Grays that prefer usefulness, a brown with ideas of cinnamon, a blue that would rather be a shadow than a boast. A measuring tape hangs from a peg, patient as a well-mannered cat. The tailor wears spectacles low and a thimble high. Shears lie on the board, heavy and convinced, their blades parted slightly as if listening. An apprentice draws thread across a cake of beeswax, leaving a modest shine, as though teaching the fibers good manners. When he sets the flat iron on the brazier, it answers with a small breath and a respectful hiss that means discipline, not drama. "Good day," the tailor says, and the room agrees without voting. He asks whether the shoulder has been keeping its promises. You offer the shoulder with the calm of someone who has no quarrel with measurements. Chalk clicks once on the board. You step onto a low platform that has known many shoes and never made a fuss about any of them. The mirror returns a composed version of you that wavers slightly in the old glass, as if reflections prefer to breathe. Your friend waits by the window, considering a bolt of blue with restrained affection. The tape circles your chest and comes home to your spine. Not unreasonably, the tailor murmurs, which is high praise here. He notes a figure in a ledger that wears its pages like thin shingles. The pencil's whisper approves. The tape settles along your arm like a tame river obedient to banks. Conversation keeps to public nouns, cuff, button, collar words that never blush and never require escort. Pins examine the morning from a cushion on his wrist and decide to be helpful. Under the cool fold of the tape, the private grammar begins. Thumb to thumb through cloth. The smallest acceptance of pressure. Then a counting that is not numbers but a pause, held for the length of a patient breath. Release follows as the tape lifts to consider the wrist. Meaning goes quietly where the tape has been, as polite as a calling card tucked under a ribbon. "We shall persuade the sleeve to remember you," the tailor says, approving of sleeves that show gratitude. The tape returns to your wrist and slips beneath the cuff. Your friend stands as if measuring light. Beneath the cuff, the calmest of pulses replies, thumb to thumb, the faintest tilt inward, a pause with room for yes, then the unhooking that gives the moment back to daylight. "One finger under," the tailor says at the cuff, testing, and the cloth agrees. He smooths the sleeve head with the back of his hand until the shape replies. Pins click against his thimble and accept their assignments. "Turn, if you please." You turn, with the gravity demanded by cloth and pins. The tailor pinches along the back seam like someone encouraging bread to rise. He steps back and folds his arms. The shears nod on the board, as if acknowledging a speech. Your friend brushes an imaginary fleck from your shoulder, and in that brushing, there is room for another quiet sentence. The faintest inward turn of the wrist, the breath-long pause, the small release that leaves only the idea of a fleck behind. He checks the hem. Floorboards keep the modest shine of things that accept a broom's advice twice a day. Pattern paper leans in the corner, curves pinned and named in pencil. Front, back, sleeve in 2 parts, collar. Over the pegs hangs an old L-wand with the contentment of a retired official whose rules endured. You try on the coat in progress. Its skeleton of basting sits lightly. Chalk lines meaning nothing to anyone but the few who need to know. The iron glides under a pressing cloth and sounds like order thinking softly. Arms out. Your arms oblige. The sleeve length considers your wrist and finds it reasonable. Heat from the iron passes near and becomes a pleasant weather, not a climate. The tailor smooths the seam in short, thoughtful strokes that make a quiet case for order. Steam rises and chooses to be modest. It leaves by the high corner and forgets itself. The wool relaxes into the shape asked of it, like a story settling into the right paragraph. He crouches to eye the side seam, squinting as if discouraging imprecision. "We will let this out a hair," he says, and a pin agrees to hold the thought. Your friend measures you with a look that contains no mathematics and still finds the answer tolerable. The apprentice gathers stray threads into a neat loop and pockets them as if saving calm for later. On the window, a ghost of fog appears, declares itself temporary, and keeps its word. You step down from the block. Coins attend to their function, counted without ceremony. The ledger receives today and promises a tomorrow that is neither hurried nor lax. Under the decent business of dates and thanks, a final exchange occurs when the tailor returns your hat. Hands meet under the brim where felt provides a small private room thumb to thumb. The smallest pressure, a pause that agrees to a later doorway, then the courteous release that leaves only felt and daylight. You set the angle that suits the light. The door gives its careful click, and the air outside seems cooler for having been compared with the shop's inward warmth. Wool on your shoulders remembers a guiding palm. and sits better for it. The smell of chalk follows you into the lane and yields to the choir of stone and peat and bread. Your friend folds the receipt into a pocket that always knows what to do with paper. The apprentice's reel drifts after you and becomes ordinary street noise. The plan quietly added to the day requires nothing more than the right pause in the right doorway later. You walk without haste, carrying a small map of chalk no one can see. The tailor's window arranges its bolts to show faith in structure. The ellwand keeps watch above the pegs, content to be a memory. The street receives you with the soft clatter of wheels and the low company of feet. Your hands return to their daylight occupations, ordinary as buttons, unremarkable as seams. Underneath, the habit continues its quiet service, like a lining that never seeks applause, and yet makes the whole coat hang true. The pulse waits where it always waits, in the small country between thumb and thumb, ready to say everything that needs saying and nothing that would trouble the air. You keep the pace that suits the afternoon. The lane opens into the wider street. The blue your friend admired becomes only sky again, exactly as it should be. The courtyard keeps its own weather cooler than the lane, quieter than the street, the kind of quiet made by water thinking about what to do next. The pump stands in the center like a sensible monument, iron dark with use, its handle worn to a mild shine where 100 palms have learned the same path. Buckets wait at respectful angles, wood staves bound by hoops that still trust their rivets, tin pails considering daylight with private dignity. The stone around the trough is patterned with old splashes that look like maps of seas a child might improve with a finger. You arrive at the edge and let the place absorb you. Overhead, washing lines draw a precise geometry from window to window shirts and shifts, a pair of stockings that have found religion and are drying in the pose of patience. A coal scuttle rests by the stair, scuffed to honesty. A broom leans nearby as if remembering a dance it used to know. The smell is agreeable. Water, iron, a faint soapiness, the cool breath of old stone, and one brave sprig of mint in a pot that has persuaded a windowsill to be a garden. Neighbors greet each other with the modest precision courtyards favor. Good day, good morrow, yes. After phrases that are less sentences than well-tuned hinges, a child counts something that does not need counting and is rewarded with satisfaction. Sparrows argue a little in the gutter and then forgive one another entirely. Somewhere above, a hinge practices sincerity. The note comes down into the courtyard and lands safely on the pump lid. You've fallen behind a woman whose pail has earned its dents. Her shawl is practical. Her hands know the drill. Behind you, your friend finds a place along the coping where a low patch of sun warms the wrist. There is no rush here. Water and gravity refuse theater. When your turn reaches the front, you step in with a kind of confidence that never raises its voice. The handle lifts, hesitates iron thinking, then settles into the rhythm everyone expects. The pump answers with a hollow, comforting cough. The water follows with a clear, obedient rope into the trough. Your friend shifts to your side as the pail fills, not to hurry you, only to keep company with the water. The two of you trade places with the choreography of people who have shared kitchens and streets long enough to forget the choreography. In that neat exchange, the handle becomes a curtain. Your palm finds the underside. Your friend's palm finds the other. Thumb to thumb, no more pressure than kindness, than the soft pause that lets a simple message form and be understood. I am well. You are well. We are exactly where we meant to be. Release is as gentle as setting a cup down without noise. Because the moment belongs to water, it looks like nothing at all. You tilt the pail and let the first pour rinse the trough's lip. The stone darkens approvingly. Your friend slides his own pail into the space the first has left, and the iron begins its sensible rise and fall again. The sound is a metronome that wants nothing but consistency. You choose to agree with it. The child who was counting decides that pumps count better and goes off to consult a cat, which has published no numbers and sees no reason to begin. The queue rearranges itself in a way that keeps everyone right. A man with flour at his cuffs eases a step forward, remembers he forgot to forget something, and steps back. A girl offers a bit of string to a boy who has a stick that is nearly a ship. Together, string and stick become extraordinary usefulness. A woman sets an empty bucket down and presses her palms together briefly, as if thanking the possibility of water, which is a good thing to think. You pause when the pail is nearly full to wipe the rim with the corner of your kerchief. The gesture has no secret in it, which is its own kind of comfort. Droplets arrange themselves on the stone in neat proofs of the theory of falling. Your friend offers a hand to steady the swing as you lift. Your hands meet for the width of a breath along the handle's curve, thumb to thumb. The shortest tilt inward, the pause that says yes without describing yes, and the unhooking that returns everything to daylight. Anyone watching sees only politeness. That is exactly what there is to see. You set the pail aside on the coping, where sun will take the chill off it. The rope's wet end hangs like a comma waiting for its claws. A woman tips a cup to her lips with the thirst of someone who has earned water honestly. She wipes her mouth with the back of her hand and regards the world with tolerable optimism. You lift the handle again to help with your friend's pail. Iron persuades water to be social. The small coughs of the pump join the little language of courtyards, the scrape of a chair, a lean of shutters, a laugh that is not a performance but merely a laugh. Your friend mentions that onions seem to travel in groups. You agree that onions have an instinct for company. The pump approves this philosophy by producing another clean rope of water. It rings softly on tin and then falls into itself with perfect memory. You both watch the ripples find the trough's calm edge and become the idea of ripples rather than the ripples themselves. Sometimes that is what calm does. It keeps the shape of motion and puts the effort away. When the pail is full, you trade places again. The handle cools your palm. The wood of your friend's bucket asks to be lifted as if requesting only persuasion. In the exchange, one more greeting tucks itself into the curve of the grip, no flourish, no emphasis. A breath-long rest where understanding lives, then the modest release that leaves only the bucket moving to its place. The child returns with a report from the cat. The cat is unhelpful but handsome. The courtyard affirms both assessments. For a moment you linger, not idling, simply agreeing with the courtyard's pace. You watch water find its calm face. You notice an escaped thread on a sleeve and smooth it. You feel the lever's small oiliness where many palms have taught it to be easy. A neighbor arrives with a new pail and the look of someone beginning to respect mourning. She asks after the pump as if it were a person. The pump answers by being reliable. You and your friend lift your pails together for the walk homeward. Each takes a side. The weight balances, and the handle becomes a bridge. One hand can find the other across without any urgency at all. Thumb to thumb beneath the bar. A pause that fits the rhythm of careful steps. A gentle letting go in time with the corner's turn. You pass through the shadow of the entry and discover that the lane has decided to feel slightly warmer than the courtyard, which you permit. Behind, the pump keeps its rhythm for the next in line. Ahead, the street remembers how to be a street. Footsteps, wheels, a soft rumor of bread turning into breakfast. You do not look back, because nothing requires looking back. Everything is behaved. The pail's weight is honest and negotiable. The water inside approves of being carried. Your hand remembers what it needs to remember, and then, as always, chooses to forget itself in favor of carrying on. The printing house smells of lampblack and boiled oil, a sober perfume that decides the pace of thought as surely as any bell. You step in from the lane, and the door settles behind you with a wooden breath. Light enters in slanted panes and lands where it is most useful on the cases. The stone, the press bed never wasting itself on walls that prefer to be unremarkable. A boy lays dampened sheets on a board, each one stacked with the care of someone who knows paper can be temperamental when it remembers being linen. You stand a little aside, hands folded, and let the room explain itself. At the stone, a compositor reads copy without moving his lips, the way a man drinks when he has been thirsty for years. His composing stick fills from the lower case and the upper, small metal letters, shouldering into their neighbors, until a line says what the line is told to say. Reglets wait like quiet spacers. A little furniture stands ready to keep the peace in a form that prefers order. He justifies, taps once with a bodkin, and the line behaves. The galley receives it with the politeness of a tray that understands hospitality. Across the room, the inking balls whisper against each other, pelt against pelt, to wake the tack. Their handles show a shine where hands have taught wood to be friendly. The pressman opens the frisket and timpan like a reader opening a well-made book. On the bed, the form rests in its chase, coins persuaded tight with a key. and a sensible nudge. The bar waits forward, patient as a horse that knows its road. Everyone here has a task, and none of the tasks are dramatic. The room keeps a steady argument for usefulness. Your friend appears by the hanging proofs that sway in a cautious breeze. The sheets are pinned like laundry learning to be literature. The black, a sober gloss. The letters raised just enough to catch a careful fingertip. He touches an edge, studies a letter that leans the tiniest degree, and decides it is leaning in the right direction. You stand near enough to be counted among the furniture, and not so near as to become part of the problem. It is a good distance for friendship. The pressman rolls a dab of ink across the form. The sound is a domestic hush, as if a cat were purring into felt. He lowers the tympan and frisket. The frisket's neat windows promise to keep margins faithful. The bar is pulled with a movement that uses strength as politely as possible. Iron answers with a low, honest groan. The platen settles. The whole contrivance thinks for a breath and then resolves its thought. The bar returns. The frisket lifts. The tympan folds back with the discretion of a servant closing a door on a good conversation. Your friend takes the fresh page by two corners and sways it once to discourage enthusiasm. He turns and offers it to you over the press bed, a small bridge of paper between two hands. Thumb to thumb beneath the lower edge, no more pressure than the paper can ignore, then the pause that lets meaning perch and be comfortable. Release follows like an exhale. The page is only a page again. Ink breathes, paper steadies. Your heartbeat learns the press's rhythm and keeps it without showing off. You carry the sheet to the board and lay it with the others. The edges line up like citizens attending a vote that has already been decided. A boy threads cord through a fresh row of proofs for hanging. He ties the knot like someone who believes in rope. At the stone, the compositor breaks a line and distributes the letters back into their little dwellings. Each piece of type returns to its compartment as if remembering a childhood street. The room's noises ink whisper, coin tap, bar groan, paper sigh compose a tune without a melody. Someone brings a new tin of ink from a shelf and prizes the lid with a bone blade that has never asked to be anything else. The surface heaves like a slow sea, then calms under the brush. The inking balls accept their share and return to their patient patting. Your friend measures the side bearing of a capital with his eye, as though settling a mild theological question in favor of legibility. You admire his restraint. He smiles with the corner of his mouth because the rest of the mouth is busy being useful. The pressman beckons for another dampened sheet. You pass it, and in that passing, your hands meet again at the seam of ordinary duty, thumb to thumb, a breath-long rest, and the courteous unhooking that leaves only paper and work. To everyone else, a sheet has been handed. To you, the day has added one small yes where yes belongs. A boy nearby hums a line of a reel as though the press had invented music. The floorboards agree to be steady under heavy feet. At the window, a draft threatens to meddle. A weight is moved to convince it otherwise. Shadows arrange themselves to flatter the cases. The compositor lifts his stick, shakes out his hand, and turns the leaf of copy with a finger that bears a permanent blush of black. He sets again, the little letters rising in the stick like a wall being taught to stand. An apprentice dusts the form with fine pounce to discourage oily friendships. The quarrels of ink and paper are old and affectionate. They like to be supervised. Your friend joins you at the board to count the fresh impressions. Fingers touch edge to square the stack. Thumb to thumb meets through the paper's thickness with the gentlest confession of pressure, then a pause measured to the patience of new ink. You let it be long enough to matter, and short enough to resemble nothing at all. The sheet edges align. The knot in the cord is approved. Two more proofs are raised to the line, as if asked to sing. A clatter from the alley tries to invent an event. The room refuses to audition. The bar travels and returns. The platen kisses and lets go. The pressman wipes the bed with the confidence of one who has always known where the crumbs collect. The work has a gait, like walking left, right, wait, breath, and you let your body find it. Calm isn't a decision here. It's a tool, like the bodkin that nudges, the mallet that persuades, the coin that holds a thought exactly so long as the thought is required. When the form has earned its rest, the pressman loosens the coins and lifts the letters away in calm handfuls. The chase is set aside like a frame awaiting its next picture. A tray of reglets receives stray lines that did their part and are thanked by being put in order. Your friend wipes a smudge from the margin with a twist of cloth, and in that twist your palms find each other one last time under the paper's lip. In the shelter of a shadow thumb to thumb, the softest acknowledgement, a pause no longer than patience, and release. The smudge is gone. So is the message, except where it remains. You step back into the lane with the smell of ink in your coat and the weight of words folded under your arm. The door closes with the same wooden breath and holds the room together behind it, as rooms do. Light out here has a wider stride. Stone speaks a different grammar, but your hands keep the press's rhythm for a while, as if the bar were still moving in the air around your pulse. It will fade, as all good working music fades, leaving only the steadiness that work taught you. You walk without hurry. The proofs shift slightly against your palm and settle. Somewhere ahead, a bell considers the hour. You consider nothing at all, which is the very best way to consider. Your friend matches your pace by instinct, more than plan. The day goes with you, printed in a quiet type no one else can see. Line after line justified by breath, perfectly legible to exactly two people and to the ordinary kindly afternoon. The loom room keeps a quiet of its own, threaded, deliberate, and certain. Light leans through a high window and draws a pale bar across the floorboards. The loom waits inside it like a calm animal, beams steady, braces sure, the warp stretched forward with the patience of a road. A basket of bobbins rests on a stool, spools shouldered close like neighbors in a pew. The air tastes of water save for threads, a breath of oil, and wool that has made its peace with being useful. The weaver greets you without lifting her voice. She is already at the bench, feet knowing which treadle to prefer and when. Heddles hang in their neat ranks, a thin forest of eyes. The reed shows a modest shine where comb teeth have polished argument into agreement. She touches the warp with the back of her hand to learn what the morning intends. The tension is reasonable, which is the right answer. Your friend stands opposite, near the cloth beam where tomorrow quietly wraps itself around wood. The shuttle travels, a smooth brown boat with its pern asleep inside. Right to left to right, it passes, never impatient, only useful. The shafts lift, a clean shed opens, the weft slides home. The beater comes forward with a tidy tap that sounds like common sense. Nothing tries to be interesting. Cloth grows because cloth prefers growing. Every eighth pass, a thread of blue appears and minds its business. Your friend watches that line and nods as if approving a sentence that keeps its promises. On the next throw, he catches the shuttle to spare the reach. In that handover there is room for the smallest grammar you both share. His wrist turns inward a finger's breadth. Your thumb meets his thumb beneath the shuttle's curve. The pressure is no more than agreement. The pause, always the real sentence, holds for the length of a patient breath. The release follows like an exhale. The shuttle goes on, and the loom does not notice it has been a messenger. The weaver does, but kindly chooses not to. Threads insist on being counted. The pattern, plain and patient, asks for nothing brilliant, only consistency. The weaver finds a misbehaving end and tames it with a lick and a twist, the oldest discipline. She nods toward the jug on the sill. You bring it nearer, lending weather to the room. The warp approves with a small sigh you feel more than hear. Your friend shapes the same quiet turn beneath the rim thumb to thumb, the pause that carries yes, then a courteous letting go. Between you, the loom's road goes on. The beater's kiss is never loud, only confident. The bench creaks when she shifts her weight, a creak that says the bench has earned opinions and keeps them. She treads a change for the border lift. Lower, lift, lower the loom, answering like a walker who knows the hill and will not waste breath on it. Cloth advances by inches and decisions, neither of which ask to be praised. Your own breathing matches the treadles without asking permission. Calm sits on your shoulders like a sensible shawl. When the pern runs thin, the room offers a longer breath. She ties on a new one with a square knot that looks pleased with itself and spins the pern with a confident pinch. While the thread settles, your friend rests his palm on the front beam. You mirror him on the other side. In that small shelter, the familiar exchange repeats slow touch, stillness, letting go, that leaves everything where it was. A draft lifts a loose end on the selvage. She smooths it back and presses with her thumb for a heartbeat. On the wall, a measure stick keeps patient marks, L's and nails, and all the tidy names for length that help cloth know when to stop pretending to be endless. The weaver checks and hums approval in a key only thread can hear. Your friend studies the roll the way someone glances at bread in an oven, not hungry yet, simply curious about how the future is proceeding. A bobbin drops in the basket and raps once like a polite knock. You replace it, and in the placing your fingers meet for a brief counsel and part. There is time for a sip of water. Tin cups keep the light in a shallow curve and hand the room back to you with a soft distortion that flatters everyone. You offer the cup across the breastbeam. Hands meet on the rim for a breath, a small bridge where meaning finds its footing and crosses without looking down. The cup returns to the sill and carefully becomes a cup again. The shuttle clicks against the race and resumes its even commute, while outside a cart speaks softly to the stones and passes on with the modest pride of having been helpful. Soon the day will ask you to move on, but not yet. One more exchange completes itself while she reaches for scissors. The shuttle returns, your hand receives it, your friend steadies the far end as if for a better angle. Thumb to thumb, the slowest turn, the gentle pause that measures a promise, and the release that believes in later. 3 threads are clipped as neatly as thoughts. You step away the way you arrive, careful of threads, careful of baskets, careful of the hush and the loom. Returns to walking fabric into the future with the same modest patience as before. Outside, the lane resumes its gate feet, wheels, the rumor of bread becoming food. Inside, the window leaves a bright square on the floor that feels like a folded letter. You decline to read it and let it lie. Your hands return to their daylight selves, harmless and ordinary, with the paws tucked back where good tools live. The hum of the warp follows you for half a street, and then, being well-mannered, lets you go. You match your step to your friends without counting. The city continues, as if it had been threading itself on a loom all along. The alehouse is careful with its light. Fire does the shining steadily. Candles keep to their corners with the thrift of good neighbors. A long settle remembers coats. The bench opposite lends its creaks sparingly. Floorboards carry clean sawdust that remembers trees without boasting. Pewter stands, where it ought domestic moons rub to a soft honesty by decent hands. You choose a seat that lets the room pass without colliding with you. The wall at your back approves. Your friend finds the other end of the bench, with the practice of someone who can sit without announcing it. The drawer of ale knots his sleeve neatly. The woman with a tray tells the air where to make space. The corner table pretends to be private and succeeds just enough. The room has agreed to be civil. You agree as well by doing nothing quickly and everything plainly. A pewter cup meets your hand, as if the two of you were introduced years ago. It has the honest chill of metal that has known water recently. You tilt it to catch the fire's plain color amber that would rather be bread than wine, and take a careful swallow that tastes like grain that learned to hum. Your breath organizes itself accordingly. Your friend tests his cup, finds it similarly sensible, and lets it rest on the ring it printed, a little moon laid down to keep the table company. At the next table, 2 men adjust their caps to improve their thoughts. Someone speaks kindly to a dog who has earned listening. A fiddler in the doorway tries the first measure of a reel and saves the rest for later. The drawer leans his shoulder to the cask. Ale makes its obedient rope into a jug. You raise your cup in a ceremony that pretends not to be a ceremony, and your friend answers with the lift that belongs to good afternoons and unambitious plans. Between the lift and the setting down, the small pattern has its place. Your fingertip gives the rim a single tap, no louder than deciding not to cough. Under the table, your palm finds your friend's. Thumb to thumb, no more force than trust, then the pause that carries the message. Held long enough for 2, and ignored by the rest. Release arrives like an exhale. The cups are only cups again. Bread arrives, with the sort of crust that proves ovens keep promises. Cheese travels with it, in a square that does not fuss about corners. The knife lays itself down so the blade looks away, which is the blade's best expression. You break the loaf with the patience the dough used in rising. Steam escapes and minds its manners. You set a piece where your friend will find it, and in the giving your fingers rest across his for the blink of a blink clarity that never bothers to introduce itself. A boy with a jug collects empties, like someone gathering commas, and lays them where the sentence breathes best. The pewter makes a mild congregation at his corner. Your friend remarks that the fire behaves like intelligent company. You agree it keeps excellent hours. The dog circles once under the settle, and settles on a patch of sawdust that clearly chose him. Dice consider chance, decide against it, and nap. You trace a little dent with your thumb. A valley where a previous afternoon decided to matter. The lip is smooth, reassuring as a road that has outlived arguments. You tap again. The sound folds into the room, part of the fire's talk, part of the floor's quiet. Beneath the table, your friend's palm meets yours for the length of a patient breath, then parts. Nothing here is secret, because nothing needs secrecy to be important. The pattern lives by being small enough to fit inside ordinariness without wearing it out. Foam subsides to a modest line. Modest lines are best for measuring afternoons. The woman with the tray deposits 2 bowls of stew at the next table. The bowls commend the spoons to honest work. A man turns a potato in the ash with the gravity of a philosopher who prefers tubers. A draft arrives, considers the room, and withdraws. The fiddler pockets his phrase for later. Your friend lays his hand flat on the table as if smoothing a map. You mirror it, palm up beneath a hinge that turns without creak. Thumb to thumb, the mildest pressure, a rest large enough to hold the next hour. Then the easy unhooking that leaves only wood and patience. Above, the rafters accept the plan and keep it. Someone addresses weather in the tone of a magistrate explaining law to a cloud. Someone else maintains that bread rises in all climates if it is treated well. Agreement spreads like butter, thin but sufficient. You spread your own butter, which behaves like butter taught by a patient ant. The bread approves, the cheese consents. Crumbs keep a neat border, as if proud of work completed. Your friend clears the corner with his thumb and gives the crumbs a good ending. The little silence that follows sets its hat neatly on its knee and asks for nothing. In that quiet, the pattern reviews itself without rehearsal. It lives in the wrist as much as in the thumb. It dwells in timing more than in push. It prefers companions who do not rush, and a room that does not look for applause. You lift the cup, respect its weight, and set it down on the ring your first lift made, completing a circle that resembles the hour when it knows what it is for. When the bread is diminished to its crusts, you collect the last crumbs with a finger and offer the plate the same courtesy. You would offer a page clean margins, no drama. Coins consider the table and decide to remain. The drawer arrives, performs the arithmetic of hospitality, and leaves the figures arranged so that both parties are right. Your friend stands without disturbing the bench's memory of sitting. You follow with equal care. Coats remember shoulders and return to theirs. At the door you pause with a hand on the latch, because pauses are a kind of gratitude. Your friend waits the breadth of your breath, neither ahead nor behind. In that narrow place between inside and out, where smoke revises itself into air, the exchange happens one last time, thumb to thumb. The soft permission, a pause wide enough to carry the warm remainder of the fire, then the letting go that leaves everything as it was before and, somehow, better. Outside, the street feels cooler, as if the afternoon had set its cup down and decided to walk. Your tongue keeps a sensible memory of grain. Your hands keep the press of pewter as a weight the day can balance upon. The door behind you closes with a polite wood sound that understands ending. You and your friend take the same side of the street without discussion. The pattern you carried in now rides back out as calmly as breath. It asks for nothing. It keeps its word. The candle shop keeps a small summer even in a cautious season. Warmth gathers around the vats and rests on your knuckles, as if greeting an old acquaintance. The door's bell is a modest ring that prefers to be useful rather than bright. Shelves hold their tidy harvests, pale beeswax in short, proud towers, tallow tapers as sensible as bread, a few colored stubs kept for saints and stubborn moods. Molds stand in ranks like polite tin soldiers. Dipping rods wait above a trough where cool water minds its own business. The candlemaker wipes his hands on a cloth that has retired from elegance and devoted itself to service. His fingers shine a little, not from vanity, but from work that likes to leave small glosses behind. He nods to you and to your friend with equal economy. The shop speaks a language of small tools with good manners, snuffers that know when to bow, wick trimmers with tight little mouths, a ladle that takes its time. From the rafters hangs a faint, honeyed air that belongs to hives you will not meet, and summer days you did not have to spend. You stand by the dipping frame and listen to the soft conversation between wick and wax. Each descent is a persuasion, each lift a promise to return. The rods go down pale, and come up with a thin memory of weight. A heartbeat later, the air writes a coolness along them, and the next descent explains the lesson again. The candlemaker's rhythm is not solemn, only sure. He hums nothing in particular. The sound folds itself into the little steam that rises from the vat and forgets to be seen. Your friend trails a fingertip along the mold's seam, then checks the table where short trimmings keep company in a dish. You try a snuffer's hinge. It answers with a modest click that proves friendship between metal and care. When a fresh taper is lifted from the frame and laid on the board, you admire the spiral left by patience and gravity, a faint twist, like a thought changing its mind. The candlemaker rests the taper across both palms and offers it. You accept with two hands because flame and future deserve symmetry. Between your palms, the warmth is more suggestion than heat, gentle, direct, convincing. Your friend steadies the base as if adjusting a page. In that small adjustment, the familiar sentence writes itself along your skin, palm to palm, line to line. The slowest slide that can still be called sliding. A pause no longer than a calm breath, and the courteous unhooking that leaves the taper exactly where it meant to be. To anyone watching, a candle has been handed with proper attention, which is true and also sufficient. You set the taper on the board and let it be admired. It carries the faint bloom that new candles wear before they learn their job. The candlemaker trims the tail and makes a neat foot with a thumbnail trained by years. He offers a few stubs for kindling short lives with honorable destinies and drops them into a paper twist. Your friend chooses a pair of household sizes and a little votive, with a seriousness such small things enjoy when they promise light. Coins settle on the counter with the careful weight of well-fed birds. They peck once at arithmetic and are satisfied. By the open window, a shallow tray holds cooling water, a quiet mirror that believes in work. You step nearer. The surface trembles when a rod returns from the vat, then clears its mind and offers a plain reflection of rafters and a corner of sky. Beeswax breathes out its memory of clover and sun. Tallow replies with a starchier honesty that still means well. The room accepts both truths and keeps the peace. Your friend lifts a taper for inspection. You steady his wrist, as if the light itself needed a witness. Between your hands, palm to palm again, there is space for yes. The pause holds, the muscles agree, and then the hands return to daylight without leaving a mark. A customer enters with the weather folded into her shawl. The bell tells the air to rearrange itself by an inch. She orders ends for a vigil that will be content to last until it is finished. The candlemaker measures out the hours with an eye, not a scale. Some trades can count without numbers if mourning and experience consent. He lays the pieces in a small wooden tray that has carried many small stubborn flames to their work. The woman touches the tray's corner, as if blessing the agreement, and leaves with the careful speed such errands require. You admire the mold's twin halves meeting with the discipline of a good book. A length of wick runs through, taut but not proud. The candlemaker pours with the confidence of someone who trusts metal and heat to remember their behavior. On the board beside the molds lies a row of new tapers cooling themselves into usefulness. Their tips hold the softest curve, like the last note of a hymn that decided not to linger. Your friend traces the curve in the air and lets the gesture fade. It seems a pity to leave without a light, so the candlemaker offers a spill and a practiced flame. He shields it with his palm, and the little fire accepts instruction. The new taper takes the lesson without argument. For a moment, the shop gives back two kinds of summer bees and sun in the smell, kitchen and hearth in the glow, and then returns to its measured day. You and your friend watch the flame steady itself. You lower the snuffer with the courtesy of a curtain falling on a very well-behaved play. While the last ribbon of smoke writes its brief line, your hands find each other again in the small country between wax and water. Palm to palm, the warmest part of the skin meeting and then resting, a pause filled to the brim with nothing urgent, then release. The candlemaker looks at neither of you because looking would be impolite when people are thinking about candles. He ties your purchases with twine and an old habit, cuts the knot with a knife that still remembers being honest, and slides the bundle forward as if it were time itself wrapped and ready. The door gives you back to the lane. Outside, the air is cooler and slightly less certain. The bundle sits easy in your hand. The faint scent of wax lingers like a polite visitor who knows the path to the gate. Your friend lifts his share. The paper whispers, The twine approves. You walk without hurry, carrying the promise of small flames like a quiet plan. Windows along the street hold their reflections and mind their dignity. The lane folds behind you as neatly as string wound back into a ball. You consider the evening's practicalities. A dish of sand to hold drips, a saucer for the stubborn stub, a match saved from a box that had good parents. These thoughts stand in a row and do not fidget. Your friend suggests the kitchen will be less severe by candlelight. You agree the day improves when it remembers how to glow without proving anything. The weight of the bundle is almost not a weight. Your palms keep the memory of the small slide. And pause the way. Cloth keeps the warmth of a shoulder for a moment after it is lifted. At the corner, the light changes its mind and becomes slightly kinder. You decide it is clever to agree. A passerby carries rushlights in a sheaf that looks like dry reeds, pretending to be useful and succeeding. The city smells of bread, rehearsing supper in stone, discussing certainty. You and your friend keep the pace of people who know where they are without needing a witness. The candle shop's summer travels with you just far enough to be polite, then bows and lets the afternoon take over. The wind grows wider as it runs downhill, as if the city were loosening its belt for the thought of the sea. Air carries a thin edge of salt and tar, a rope smell, a cask smell, and a clean wetness that has not yet learned to be rain. You let the slope set your pace careful, unhurried, matched to the gradient of stone polished by wheels and boots. A gull draws a line across the sky and leaves it open for others to complete. Your bundle of candles rides light in your hand. The twine has the comfortable bite of things that mean well. At the mouth of the wind, a porter negotiates a cask down 2 small steps. He talks to it in the language of helpful grunts. The cask considers and then agrees, shoulder by hoop, hoop by shoulder. Its staves are weathered to the color of bread crust and rubbed to a dull shine where hands have taught them obedience. You and your friend move aside not as a favor, but as a courtesy paid to gravity. The cask passes like a well-behaved argument. Behind it comes a whiff of resin and ale and the memory of ships. The porter nods a wage-keeping nod to the day. The day promises nothing extravagant and keeps that promise. You stand at the corner where the wind opens enough to admit a cart and a thought at the same time. The stones here are a little darker, always damp with the sea's opinion. Nets hang from a beam like practical curtains. A coil of rope on a barrow rests in a deliberate spiral that looks almost ornamental and is not. A woman tightens a kerchief and reconsiders a basket's angle. The basket accepts her conclusions. Your cloak, too thin for theater and just right for the air, falls across your arm. Cloth makes a small private tent where hands can find what they are looking for without exciting the attention of weather. Your friend draws near with the uncommitted step of someone consulting a choice of lanes. You offer the shelter of the fold as though smoothing a crease. He accepts as though adjusting the same. Beneath the cloth, your palms meet with the neatness of 2 coins stacked. First press, a calm yes. Second press, a slower yes. The kind that looks toward evening and is patient with the distance. The pause between them is the real sentence. Release follows with a humility that gives the moment back to the street. A cart rattles past with barrels that have opinions on balance but will not share them loudly. The driver lifts 2 fingers, and you return 2 in the belief that civility improves with circulation. A boy strides along in a pair of boots that plan to be larger next year. He stamps once to confirm their progress. Down near the opening, the wind thinks about entering in earnest, changes its mind, and contents itself with rearranging a few strands of rope, which prefer to be persuaded, not ordered. You wait for the porter to come back up the 2 steps because waiting is a craft. He emerges with the barrow, a creature that believes in leaning. The barrow's single wheel considers the groove it has worn to a habit and follows it. The porter wipes his brow with a sleeve that does not mind. He declares the cask a fair weight and the day a fairer one. You bless both verdicts with a remark about steady shoulders. Your friend adds a comment on honest hoops. The porter grins as if he has been paid twice, once in coin and once in words that suit him. Beyond, the lane shows a sliver of water between buildings, just a suggestion, like a well-mannered guest waiting at a threshold. You and your friend walk toward it until the city allows a glimpse, a triangle of harbor, the stutter of masts, a hint of wave gleam like polished pewter. A winch creaks once, satisfied with its own story. Gulls practice verdicts that apply equally to fish and bread. The air keeps its salt without becoming a sermon. The sight is enough to cool the mind without interrupting it. On your return up the slope, the cask has reached its resting place against a step, chalked with a wedge that looks like common sense. The porter is pinning the order to his memory with a short length of twine. Your cloak, having done its duty, folds back over your arm and behaves in its shadow. You repeat the two-beat greeting as neatly as the first press. Press, each with the softness of shared patience, a breath held to make the meaning comfortable, and the letting go that makes room for footsteps. No flourish, no emphasis, only timing and consent, fitted to the lane's own rhythm. You pass a doorway where tar keeps company with shavings. The shavings smell like a shop that made peace with the sea. A cat inspects a coil of rope and finds it satisfactory for being a coil. A woman appears with a cloth to cover a tray of buns whose steam has been making promises to the neighborhood. She allows you to admire without making you suspected of purchase. Your friend claims one bun with a coin and breaks it in half, so the steam can introduce itself to both of you. It tastes like warmth that has chosen a shape. Crumbs brush off the fingertips and join the stones, which collect such things with benign fastidiousness. You adjust the cloak because the wind invites you to. Your friend smooths the fold because smoothness is a friend of wind. Under the cloth, another small exchange occurs, less a message than a keeping. First press, a memory of morning. Second press, a nod to later. The pause between them enough to hold the hour and not spill. When the cloth falls back into its simple drape, neither of you looks different, which is the correct result. The porter begins to sing a work song that declines to be a tune and succeeds at being a rhythm. The wheel remembers the groove and travels it in reverse. The cask settles into the day's background like a properly fitted joint. A man carries a coil on his shoulder and marks the stones with water-dark footprints that qualify as a map until they dry. You and your friend step around the prints so they can finish being cartography while they still believe in it. By the time you reach the bend, the wind has decided to be narrow again, preferring its old habits. The salt recedes to a suggestion. The tar becomes memory rather than event. The city takes back the smell of stone and smoke and the sober comfort of kitchens warming on schedule. Your hands keep the double beat a few steps longer, then let it go the way a wave lets go of a shore having arrived. Having said enough, willing to be water again. At the corner, a ribbon of light falls between buildings like something trimmed from the sky and left where it might be useful. You pass through it and feel its temperature on your cheek. Your friend does the same, and the two-beat rhythm finds a polite echo in the shadow of your sleeve. The briefest press, the respectful pause, the second press, and the release that behaves like a small bow to an audience of none. The lane approves by continuing. The porter calls a wish after you to keep your footing. You return a wish to keep his wheel true. Such exchanges finish as quickly as they begin, but have a way of staying done. The harbor smell lingers just enough to prove it was here, and then becomes a story the air tells itself. You tuck your bundle of candles under your arm and give the twine a last approving pinch. Your friend moves in step because stepping together is a long habit. The city closes its pocket of salt behind you and opens the next thing, a street that asks only for walking, and gets exactly that. The bridge stands between two kinds of breathing, the towns and the waters, and lets them pass through one another without complaint. You walk to the parapet that has learned the exact height of elbows and the exact weight of people who decide to rest. Stone is cool, where wind has trained it to be sensible. The river moves below with patience, so even it looks like stillness, until a crease shows where current rides a hidden piling. You set your forearms on the coping and allow the edges of thought to do what the water does. Proceed, unhurried, in a direction chosen long ago. From here, the roofs sit like folded cards. Chimneys send up moderated opinions. A cart crosses with the dignity of necessity. Its wheel finds the same notch it found yesterday and approves it again. Your gloves whisper when your hands adjust. Leather speaking to felt in a language that requires no audience. Your friend arrives without ceremony, the way a second clause joins a sentence that is already working. You do not turn. The river gives you enough to look at for two. A breeze comes up the water, wearing a taste of salt from the firth and a little iron from the railings. It lifts the fringe on your cuff, tests the nap of your hat, and moves along. Birds draw short diagonals from post to post and settle on their decisions at once. You consider the glove not as clothing, but as grammar. Leather changes the consonants of touch and slows the vowels. Through two small countries of stitched hide, thumb must find thumb. The pressure is therefore a suggestion rather than an argument. You pinch the wrist seam as if making peace with a stitch. Your friend mirrors the motion. The glove itself becomes a modest curtain. The tug is small, smaller than the breeze would care to notice, but the pause is the true sentence. Below the arch, the water deepens to a color that makes its own weather. The surface holds a copy of the sky edited by ripples. Clouds break into friendlier pieces and learn to be river things. A skiff noses along the bank, its oars lifted like careful questions. On the steps, a woman in a red shawl rests her basket and counts nothing. Wind fusses at the fringe and loses interest. You count breaths until the skiff clears the pier and find them all acceptable. The tug repeats, not as a confirmation, but as a punctuation mark that invites the next clause of the afternoon. Tug, then pause. Then a second tug held a fraction longer enough to say, tomorrow's hour, without obliging the breeze to carry the news. Your friend returns the measure, the first soft as a scent, the second a private then, both ending in a release that gives comfort back to stone. Warmth fades where your pulse argued briefly, and then decided against debate. The parapet shows its history in a low gloss, where hands have worn it obedient. Scratches cross like a soft map of surviving. Near your right elbow, a peck mark asks not to be ignored. Your friend tilts his brim as though shading thought rather than eyes. You share the precise silence in which a plan adopts you without asking for names. A lamplighter passes, daylight wasting no candle on him yet. He balances his ladder at an angle only lamplighters and angels understand. He does not hurry. He does not need to. The river takes his reflection and draws it thin as ribbon, promising to keep it until evening. Your friend clears his throat softly. A sound like a page turned by someone determined not to wake a sleeper, and the slower tug comes near the thumb joint, deliberate as a promise. Your glove answers with equal and opposite courtesy. A leaf lands, finds a personal current, and embarks on a career with no ambition beyond proceeding. You try to think of a better ambition and fail, which feels like wisdom. Far along the parapet, two women trade methods for keeping drafts from doors. Cork and cloth are discussed with gravity. The wind rehearses a change of mind and decides to remain itself. Your friend asks, in a voice that could be addressing the rail, whether the hour suits you. You answer by smoothing the seam with your free hand, the approved method for yes. The breeze takes this as permission to lift a curl of leather and inspect the lining. It finds nothing sensational and concedes the point. Downriver, the banks draw together like a mouth preparing to hum. The imagined note would be low and satisfied. A cart halts on the crown to let a pram decide the order of passing. Wheels stand on either side like animals shown a gate. They sort themselves without dialogue. In the pause, your friend's fingers touch the cuff seam and press once more the briefest rehearsal, more for the comfort of habit than for need. You return the measure so the habit will not feel neglected. Stone, glove, pulse, pause. The elements assemble easily. When you straighten, the view obligingly rearranges itself to accommodate a standing person. Water looks the same because water makes a profession of consistency. The hills keep their part. The chimneys play theirs. The bridge remains uninterested in applause. You lift your chin to test the air's temperature and find it in favor of walking. Your friend buttons his glove with a click that could be a period at the end of a polite paragraph. You leave the parapet as if placing a book back where it was most comfortable. The first steps down from the crown feel different, only because the angle of the world has chosen to remind you of gravity. On the far side, stone warms slightly where sun has got in early. You loan your palm to that warmth for a heartbeat and take it back. The agreed hour takes its seat somewhere behind your wrist and waits politely. At the foot of the bridge, a boy sells paper twists of sugared almonds, pink and white like cautious confetti. You buy a small twist and let the sweetness occupy your mouth without turning itself into an event. Your friend takes one almond and considers it as if it were a vote. You walk on, carrying the taste and the answer together until both disappear into blood and plan. Behind you, the parapet keeps receiving elbows, and the river keeps being the river. The fiddler tunes in the doorway, as if asking the lane for permission. Resin whispers along the bow. The first note tests the evening and finds it willing. Inside the yard, a few pairs mark time with feet that never hurry heel. Toe, the old civility of measured steps. You stand near the lintel where the sound is warm, but not too close to be polite. The air smells of peat, softening into ash, a hint of ale, and wool that has met weather and borne no grudge. Your friend arrives with the same practicality as the tune. A reel lifts its head, and shoulders throughout the yard remember what to do. A rise and fall that belongs to people who can be merry without spilling the day. The fiddler's chin presses home. His elbow writes the rhythm in small letters. The strings speak with unargumentative certainty. When the measure settles, you and your friend pass the bow front like two notes that know their place in the bar. Hands find hands the way the tune finds its steps. Your palm meets his in the friendly way that looks like greeting anyone would approve. The rhythm permits a clasp and disguises it. Thumb to thumb, no more weight than the bow, carries then a tiny inward tilt as the reel turns its corner. You keep the pause the length of a bar, no longer, letting meaning sit like a well-behaved guest. Release follows on the upbeat. The tune is already talking about the next figure. Around you, souls scuff the dust into soft weather. A girl laughs once, and then decides to save the rest. Someone stamps to remind the ground it has work to do. The ground agrees with a thud that neither boasts nor apologizes. The fiddler leans into a grace note that tastes of smoke and afternoon. Your friend adjusts his cuff in the shape of consent, and you echo it with a fingertip to the brim that could stand for nothing at all. The tune turns, and so do you. When palms meet again, the clasp is folded inside the courtesy of passing, pressure as light as resin, the breath-long hold that carries the real sentence, and the neat unhooking that leaves only steps, dust, and the note the fiddler has already finished. It is a conversation that forgets itself as soon as it is said, and therefore remains true. The yard approves of such things. Evening approves too, by being precise rather than grand. When the reel rests, talk resumes at the level of honest bread, prices, weather, a missing button, the claim that onions behave better if you speak kindly when chopping them. You take a place by the doorpost and lend the wood your shoulder. Your friend leans beside you with the naturalness of a comma. Between you, in the quiet, the fiddler leaves behind. Thumb meets thumb one last time, softer than breath. The pause smaller than a blink, the letting go exact. It is enough. A boy brings a pitcher that explains itself in pewter and foam. Cups find their owners by habit. The tune changes its shirt and comes back as a slower thing, a reel that has learned not to hurry. You listen, because there is nothing better to do than listen. Your friend listens too. Evening folds over the yard like a shawl. You pass through it the way the bow passes over the string, with care, with patience, with the humility of someone who knows the tune will continue whether or not you are present. Calm is easy company when rhythm minds the manners for you. The stitching circle meets where light does not shout by a casement that lets the afternoon sit in a square upon the floor. Chairs are ordinary and therefore perfect. Baskets keep their silence under skirts. Thread behaves. Needles draw thin silver lines between cloth and air. The cleanest geometry the day has offered. Someone hums inside the mouth, a tune that annoys no one and keeps the hands from thinking too much. You sit where a sleeve can be turned without performing. Your friend takes the stool at your knee and offers the quiet business of unpicking. The talk stays in safe pastures. The price of soap, whether indigo is veined. The rumor that a certain baker refuses to argue with dough and therefore the dough is obedient. On the mantel, a clock makes sensible promises and keeps them. Not because anyone listens, but because clocks enjoy that sort of thing. Your needle pauses above the seam. Between two stitches lies a shelf of stillness, big enough for a gesture to take a cup of air and sit down. You rest your hand on your friend's knuckles, as if steadying the cloth. Thumb to thumb, barely more than a thought, then the briefest inward turn. Like a nod offered under a hat brim. Hold it for the space a thread needs to be threaded. Let it go as the needle passes. Cloth remembers the pressure. The eye sees only tidiness. Outside, a cart complains agreeably. A child recites numbers with optimism. Someone corrects the order and is thanked. The square of light shifts its corner toward the door. The seam you are mending settles into obedience and stops trying to be news. Your friend slides a pin toward you. Its head catches the light with a composure that feels like good manners. Beneath the cloth, the pattern repeats small, exact, permissive of nothing exaggerated. The pause is large enough to carry yes, and small enough to look like patience. A tale is told about a cuff that refused to meet its button despite reason. The cuff is mocked. The button is forgiven. The seamstress who mended the quarrel is praised without being named. Needles approved by going faster. Your hands slow instead. Gentle touch. Breath's worth of stillness. And the return to daylight that leaves only thread, and the good feeling of even tension. The cloth lies smooth, surprised to find itself correct. Steam rises from a pot somewhere in the house, and thinks better of becoming a cloud. Bread is mentioned and unanimously elected. The pincushion passes like a small kingdom, changing hands without a war. Inside the smoothness of all this, you and your friend exchange one more pause, the kind that does not tug, only rests, as if telling the wrist it has done well. The seam lays down the last inch of argument. The knot is tightened and disappears like a wise thought. When the circle folds for the day, chairs return to being chairs. Baskets look pleased with themselves without being immodest. You fold the mended piece along the line where it wished to lie all along. Your friend lowers a needle into its sleeve with the care due to any citizen who has done enough. Palms part easily. The air remains as it was. The square of light draws its hem away from the floor. You carry out into the lane a pattern as quiet as thread, strong enough to hold a day together without asking to be seen. The castle steps sit in a breeze that has already learned the shape of the rock. They rise in the sober spiral of authority and take your weight as if measuring your intentions. You climb with the pace the stone recommends, firm, not eager. The handrail has acquired the polish of many decisions. From here, roofs confess their slopes. The far hills practice being patient. The sky rehearses weather and postpones it. Halfway up, you stop, not to rest, but to permit the view its turn. Your hand finds your pocket because pockets like to be included. Fingers settle against coin and kerchief and the other small proofs of daily competence. Your friend arrives with the steadiness of someone who respects stairs. Neither of you declare anything that needs to be heard. Wind inspects lapels and retires with a note to itself. Inside the pocket, the language that does not trouble the air speaks. Thumb to thumb, the slightest companionship, then a pause that occupies exactly the space between in and out. The wrist turns a fraction inward, as if listening. The coin considers turning with you, and then decides to behave. Release is slow enough to be kind, quick enough to be forgotten by everything except muscle. Below, a guide speaks in an outdoor voice to a cluster of hats. The hats nod in democratic rhythm. A boy counts battlements and stops when he loses interest. Far off, a bell takes the trouble to be precise. Your friend adjusts a cuff as if consulting a footnote. You consult your pocket again, purely to honor the habit. It is rewarded with the same soft agreement and the same decent letting go. A gull takes issue with the parapet and resolves the quarrel by leaving. Sun shows its face and is content with a brief appearance. The steps advise another short climb. You oblige. At the next turn, you rest your palm on the cool stone. Your friend does the same opposite you. Between the two of you, there is a span of air where a slower message might travel if needed. It is not needed. The day understands. You finish the rise with your pace still tidy. At the top, the wind behaves as though it owns the place and magnanimously allows you to visit. You lend it your coat for a moment. It returns the favor by making the cloth sit better. Your hand leaves the pocket and becomes merely a hand again. The gesture goes back to its shelf, folded and ready. The view looks large and therefore kind. You go on. The spice shop is a weather of its own. Warmth carries cinnamon first, then pepper with a quiet argument, then clove that would like to be a bell if only bells were edible. Jars with careful shoulders stand in ranks. Scales wait with their little brass pans ready to practice justice. The merchant greets you in a voice that respects weight, not noise. You nod to the powders and seeds as if they were old neighbors who never move house. You and your friend lean in to regard a heap of mustard that glows like a hopeful afternoon. He measures a spoonful onto the scale. The beam thinks, then declares itself level. You watch fennel seeds roll into their corner like good listeners. The scoop pauses above a jar. The merchant explains the reed mat where Sacs prefer to sleep. The mat pretends not to be flattered. Counting becomes the grammar of the moment. You and your friend take turns tapping a set of coriander seeds from palm to palm, 1, 2, 3, though the numbers never trouble your mouths. The touch is lighter than breath. The pause longer than counting requires and shorter than attention would detect. Releases the natural fall of seeds into the waiting paper. The scale nods. The day continues to balance in its mild way. A boy sneezes with honest surprise and apologizes to a cone of cumin. No one minds. A stick of cinnamon becomes a baton pointing to nothing, making everyone feel included. The merchant wraps packets in paper that once considered being a letter and ties them with string that has never wished to be anything else. Between the knot and the cut, another counting happens, thumb to thumb, a pause, and the neat surrender of twine to the blade. You try the pepper one grain cracked under a tooth and admit its case for the world being awake. Your friend steals a single clove to see whether it still remembers trees. It does. A small ledger absorbs figures and returns calm. Weight forgets its worries. Smell continues to employ itself with success. You find a jar of mace that has taken vows of beauty. The merchant allows you to admire it without becoming a problem. At the counter, you and your friend tally 2 packets, then 3, then 1 little extra for the hour that will need it. Palms meet briefly over the money, as if steadying arithmetic. Thumb to thumb, the pause that fits inside the space between purchase and pocket, and the gentle letting go that leaves only change properly earned. The bell on the door rehearses a polite exit, and then performs it perfectly as you step back into the lane. Outside, the city smells briefly like cinnamon pretending to be a street. The wind argues, then decides to agree. Your pockets carry both spice and the quieter weight of the small count, and pause you have just set aside for later. It lives there next to coins and kerchief, neither proud nor shy. You keep walking. The hour adjusts its hat and follows. The back room is not grand enough to be called a club, and not private enough to be a secret 3 chairs. A window that minds its own drafts, a table that knows the rules. A chessboard waits with the quiet arrogance of squares that have never apologized. Pieces stand at attention, pawns ready to be reasonable, bishops assuming they are, knights with their heads turned as if thinking about something else. Your friend sits where knights can be misunderstood. You take the seat that likes rooks. The first moves require nothing from the room. Wood touches wood with a soft click of moderation. You open plainly. Your friend answers with courtesy disguised as ambition. Shadows consider joining in, and then remain impartial. A jug stands nearby to promise the future without insisting. The hour settles into its chair and lets the game use its minutes like coin. When you lift your knight, the small knock of wood on wood gives cover. Your free hand finds his under the edge of the table, as if retrieving a fallen thought. Thumb to thumb, the pause occupying the width of a square, then a slow release timed to the knight's new post. It is easy to hide a message inside a piece that moves in corners. You sit back. The knight pretends it knew all along. Pawns proceed. A bishop remembers how to be diagonal and proves it. The board begins to tell itself the usual story in a new accent. Your friend looks at nothing in particular, with admirable concentration. You press your palm briefly to the underside of the tabletop to measure the grain and return with the same patience as the rook sliding into its file. In that sliding, hands meet again breath-long, exact then part, to let a pawn perform the simplest duty in chess, being present. Somewhere beyond the door, a chair is moved with respect. A step becomes a decision, and then becomes nothing. The window offers a square of light that is satisfied with its edges. Your knight finds work. Your rook becomes a road. Between them, 2 exchanges occur in the shelter of moving wood, no more dramatic than punctuation, clear enough to keep the sentence honest. When the end is ready, it does not announce itself. Queens trade compliments and retire. The last few moves behave as though they were inevitable and are therefore kind. Your friend tips his king with a fingertip that does not ask for comfort and does not need it. You bow your head the way anyone would in the face of such decency. Under the board, thumb meets thumb gratitude rather than plan, and then lets go, so the table can be only a table again. The jug keeps its promise. Cups find their task. The board resets with the humility squares secretly admire. You think about how corners can hide gentleness if they practice. Your friend thinks about nothing in particular and does it well. Outside, the afternoon turns its page. Inside, you gather the quiet as if it were pieces too, leaving none behind. Lanterns wait like patient stars, in a shallow box glass panels, clouded with usefulness. Brass frames, a little smudged by care. Oil sits in a jug the color of honesty. Wicks lie coiled like ideas that have decided to be practical. You and your friend stand in the half-light of a passage and do what passages want. Attend to small tasks without opinion. The wick is trimmed to a humility that will make light, not smoke. Your friend steadies the lantern, finger and thumb at the throat. You pour oil with the focus due to anything that can be spilled. The smell is domestic and sure. The flame takes instruction, learns to stand, and then reduces its eagerness to a steady glow. Glass reflects a version of your hand that is all outline and intention. Heat softens the metal's voice enough to give you cover. You reach to test the latch. His sleeve brushes yours and stays. Thumb to thumb beneath the brass lip, no pressure, just the permission of contact, then the pause that might be described as yes, if either of you were feeling wasteful with words. Let go as the latch settles. The lantern approves by being useful. You polish a stubborn fog from one panel with a corner of linen. The cloth grows warm. Your palm grows certain. Your friend lowers the hook and raises it again as if to ask the ceiling its opinion. The ceiling declines, as is proper. Between motions, hands find hands where the handle meets its frame. Gentle, brief, agreed. Light continues to behave. Another lantern behaves likewise. Oil, wick, flame, glass, the little litany. Your breath slows to the measured patience of a flame that has no desire to be a bonfire and no talent for it. When both lanterns stand ready, you shade one with your palm and let the other shine. In their small weather, the message repeats a last time, folded into practicality and leaves no ash. You carry the light down the passage, and the passage chooses to be kind to it. Walls accept their shadows like sensible citizens. Floorboards give back a softened version of your steps. At the door, you lift the latch. Outside air attends to the flame and finds it satisfactory. The lantern becomes a small promise that keeps itself all evening. Your hands compose themselves back into daylight manners. The oil smell lingers like a good example. The hour takes note and moves on. The stonecutter's yard is a study in honest intentions. Blocks stand in patient ranks. Chalk lines like sentences waiting to be spoken. Mallets rest, having said enough for 1 hour. Chisels lie with their mouths closed, which suits peace. Dust lifts in a faint ceremony when the sun moves its shoulder. You and your friend walk the aisle between stones, as if reading a library that prefers quiet. Along one face, a mason's square leaves its ghost in chalk. Another shows a draft of a curve that will someday be a kindness above a door. Your friend pauses at a block with a neat numeral penciled small at the corner. He lays his palm on the cool grit. You lay yours opposite. Between them, the stone becomes a desk where silence writes a brief letter, thumb to thumb across the chalk margin so mild it could be an error. Then a pause, measured to a breath you would not trouble anyone to hear. Release like dust falling back into its home. You step away, and both of you brush hands against your coats, which is the uniform of people who have touched stone and acquitted themselves well. The foreman nods without troubling his hat. He inspects a template and finds it as he left it, which is always pleasing. Someone draws a line with the point of a nail. The line accepts the instruction without complaint. You remark that numbers suit stone because neither are in a hurry. Your friend agrees and adds that chalk is the most polite of prophets, being easy to revise. At a bench, a mallet and chisel propose the beginnings of a molding. Click, breathe, click. Breathe the pattern by which disorder becomes geometry. The sound covers a second exchange at the end of a block. Thumb to thumb barely there. The pause that says keep, and the leaving that lets work reclaim the yard. Dust approves by being dust about it. You give the foreman an unnecessary compliment that he pockets as if it were a coin. He returns an unnecessary warning about weather that you promise to respect. The yard returns to its conversation with shape. You return to the street with grit on your cuff, and the small satisfaction of having aligned your hands along a line the day meant to draw anyway. Night approaches by degrees, and with good manners. The watchman sets out on his round at a pace the stones know by heart. Lantern on a pole, cudgel in hand, hat arranged to suggest seriousness without discourtesy. The street recognizes its responsibilities. Shutters practice being shut. Steps rehearse being careful. You and your friend keep to the lee of a wall that has served many such evenings without remark. The watchman taps once on the curb, not to frighten anyone but to remind the hour it is being counted. The sound goes out, notes the corners, and returns cooler. He nods to you as to ordinary citizens, which you are. Your friend answers with a greeting at the level of weather. In the shelter of that politeness, your hands meet as plain as pockets, thumb to thumb, a pause that borrows the watchman's rhythm, and an unhooking time to his second step. You fall in behind, at a respectful remove. His shadow keeps the width of the lane decent, crossing doorways, trimming the edges where gossip might prefer to leak. When he pauses to lift his lantern glass, catching its own light with a modest bloom, you pause as well. The message repeats under the cover of looking upward. It belongs to the lantern for a breath, then it belongs to no one. That is ideal. A cat inspects the fact of night and approves. A late tray passes, covered and careful. A loaf and a thought of broth travel together without quarrel. The watchman checks a gate that declares itself shut and is believed. Tap, tap. The measure becomes a way to tangle the day's loose threads without knots. At the crossing, he warns a pair of boys off an argument with the art of saying nothing and making it sound like sense. The boys decide to obey the sense. You and your friend decide to let the watchman's second tap serve as the comma between two halves of the hour. Under it, the small grip finds its place, holds, and is finished. You part from his shadow at the next turning with the respect due to any useful profession. The night accepts you back as private walkers. Doors hold their tongues. The sky keeps most of its stars where clouds cannot misplace them. Your hands remember the measure a few steps longer, and then let the cudgel's tap go on alone, like a pendulum doing the right amount of work forever. The round continues. So does the hour. The snug is a pocket at the back of a tavern where talk wears slippers. Panes bloom with a modest fog, framing the room like a charity. A loaf retires on a board. Cheese contemplates the future in squares. A small fire conducts itself with steady manners. You and your friend claim the bench that knows how to keep secrets by not having any. Plates arrive whose chief virtue is being exactly enough. Cups find their rings as if returning home. Conversation beside you attends to a game of draughts with the decency of teaching children how to lose without becoming scholars of it. The serving woman values steps over words and proves it by arranging both correctly. The snug narrows the evening to a sensible width. Under the edge of the table, palms meet in the way anyone might steady a plate. Thumb to thumb, where the board hides the middle of the sentence. The pause big enough to hold a plan without pinching it. The release so even the wood is not disturbed. Overhead, you remark upon ale as if it were a weather. Your friend replies as if testing the barometer. The cups agree to be cups. Twice more, the language makes itself known and forgets itself in the same motion, once during the salt's journey across the table, once when a knife is set down with the blade turned politely away. Neither gesture attracts attention. Both complete an hour that began outdoors and now prefers the middle of a room. Fire learns from the lamp and remains content. When the snug has done its work, plates look like the ends of paragraphs. Coins settle their differences quietly, and the tray departs with the untroubled dignity of objects fulfilling their purpose. You stand. Your friend adjusts a cuff. Hands find each other one last time against the bench back, as if smoothing wood. The pause is the smallest of the night, because the snug has already said everything. Outside, the lane remembers your feet without asking why. Rain decides to be thorough and chooses the pen stair as its instrument. Water threads the arch in quiet strings. The stone answers with a shine that is not vanity. You and your friend take shelter under the curve where weather has learned to behave. The sound is a patient curtain, drawing the lane into a narrower story. You wring your kerchief in a way that keeps it from feeling insulted. Drops count themselves off your sleeve with admirable arithmetic. Your friend shakes his hat once and restores it to intellectual capacity. Between these sensible gestures, you offer the cloth to him. He steadies your wrist, and your palms rest together for the span a drop takes to fall, from lintel to flag, thumb to thumb warm through damp paws, then release that permits rain to keep conducting. A cart blurs by in a spray that looks like painters working quickly. Someone laughs from the far end of the pen, as though they've remembered a joke without its words. The rain keeps the punchline. A dog wanders in, decides it likes both of you, and stands precisely in the middle of the benefit. You step aside to allow mastery to express itself. The dog accepts and leaves, perfectly pleased. Kerchiefs are returned to pockets. Hats settle. The arch lends you its old discipline. A second exchange hides inside the business of checking whether the worst has passed. Your hand on the stone, his hand finding yours in that small country between wall and coat, the breath-long pause that carries out what words would ruin, and the clean let go when a drop finds its way down the back of your collar and persuades you to move again. When the rain grows modest, you step into the thinness of it and find it more like air that remembers being water than water insisting on being air. The pen keeps its last few ropes of wet like strings on a good instrument. You touch your brim to thank it. Your friend touches his. The lane resumes, washed to a temper suitable for evening. Your hands remember the warmth, and the kerchief remembers doing an excellent job. Noon arrives by bell, with the workmanlike authority of metal agreeing with air. You happen to be at a doorway not remarkable enough to be remembered, which moves it immediately into the class of perfect doorways. Your friend approaches from the left with the expression of someone who has made peace with noon. The hour enters the street and arranges itself in sensible parcels. You pause in the threshold because thresholds deserve it. A doorframe keeps a small, private climate just wide enough for two hands to rest. Your palm finds the jamb. His palm finds yours under the cover of the other side. Thumb to thumb barely there then. The pause exactly the length of one good toll, not a half, not two, and the release that returns both hands to wood with appropriate respect. The bell moves on with its work. People measure bread, errands, and patience in its wake. A boy salutes the sound with a heel click that nearly works. A vendor declares that noon is the proper time for apples. Apples avoid taking sides. You and your friend repeat the gesture once more, as if to sign the hour into the ledger. The second pause is shorter, because routine deserves brevity. You step back into sunshine that does not trouble itself with brilliance. The door resumes being a door. Noon resumes being a place on a clock. Your hands return to hanging lightly, as hands do when they have finished touching useful wood. The day continues as if it had planned this doorway long before it was built. The new town ridge takes the wind's side and lets it speak. Houses stand with the fresh certainty of lines drawn with a good ruler. Pavements practice being level with a zeal that would be comic if it were not so restful. You and your friend walk the crest, where hats must be argued with and then made to obey. The view loosens the lungs. To the north, a stripe of water keeps its silver opinion. To the south, the old ridge folds its roofs like a hand. Your brim receives a courteous tug from the breeze. You answer with a thumb and two fingers, and make an ally of it. In that small ceremony, your friend mirrors you. Thumb to thumb under the sheltering brim, two small countries finding their border pause, and off again without a fuss. The pavement approves of equal strides. Your shadows agree to accompany you without interventions. You talk about nothing, as if it were an art project, and do it well. The wind tastes of stone that has not yet learned soot, of lime, of paint that believes in itself, of the far sweetness that travels up from gardens where someone with patience persuades hedges to be agreeable. At a corner, a railing leans like a good sentence. You rest your wrist upon it for a moment and let the wind finish its thought. Your friend touches the same iron a foot away, and the pause stretches between like a thread. You have both decided not to pull. Then hats are persuaded, coats are smoothed, and the ridge lets you go on with dignity, which is what ridges are for. The kitchen keeps its small son behind a curtain fire in the grate, flour on the board, a kettle that cannot help but think aloud. You and your friend enter with the practical quiet that kitchens enjoy. A loaf cools on a rack, releasing stories about ovens that behaved. A bowl of apples keeps its round opinion to itself. You roll your sleeves because sleeves like being included. Flour dusts your hands and, in dusting, civilizes them. Your friend brings the wooden paddle, respectful as a clerk. Between the board and the basin, a soft exchange hides in plain sight. Thumb to thumb over the flour, a press no heavier than a pinch of salt, the pause that warms like a hearth, and the letting go that leaves only dough being persuaded to be bread. You knead. The board answers with a sound like thinking. Your friend cuts a clean fold and returns the knife to its place with a correctness that would flatter a magistrate. When the loaf to be rests under its cloth, you brush flour from one another's wrists with the natural kindness of cooks. The gesture repeats, less message than habit, more warmth than words. The kettle reaches the conclusion it was meant to reach. Cups settle on a table that has accepted 1,000 reasons to sit and will accept 1,000 more. You pour and stir and watch steam practice disappearing. The kitchen, pleased with your conduct, expands by a degree. Outside, the light considers evening. Inside, the crust on yesterday's heel cracks like a quiet good idea. The bread, the bench, the breath, the small press, they share a temperament. You adopt it. The close narrows night into kindness. Voices slope away. Footsteps talk in a smaller grammar. You stand where a lamp makes its patient circle on the flags. Your friend counts the last coin from a pocket that is looked after more than money. He turns it once as if it were a moon rehearsing phases, then sets it upon your palm to let arithmetic be done with dignity. In the transfer, skin speaks the sentence it has learned. Thumb to thumb, a pause tuned to the lamp, flame steadying, and a release that leaves the coin to settle by its own weight. Metal becomes metal again. Hands become hands. The coin travels to the shop, the hour travels with it. A window marks your passing with a friendly twitch of curtain, and then loses interest, as windows should. A cat rehearses ownership of the doorway, then forgets what it owns. Rain thinks about returning, and decides to practice somewhere else. The lamp keeps its circle, with the temper of a decent official. A second coin goes the same way as the first palm. Pause, letting go, and the evening is relieved of a duty it did not mind performing. Your friend taps the pocket's mouth to close the ledger. The close smiles in stone. Midnight carries its own lantern and walks softly. The wind has put away its day and left out only what cannot be folded. Doorways, thresholds, breath. You and your friend stand at the corner where the street remembers both of you without making a fuss. The air smells of peat, deciding to be memory, and of rain deciding to abstain. The last exchange is patient. It sits in your wrists before it moves to your thumbs. It borrows the lamp's steadiness and the cat's indifference. Thumb to thumb, a press that is almost a thought. Then the longest pause of the day, not long to anyone else, but long enough to hold everything you meant to say and did not need to say. Release follows like the final step of a stair you know by heart. Footsteps go away at a polite pace. One set to the right, one set to the left. The wind does not watch but notices. Windows rest. Stone keeps confidence. You walk past the lamp and the lamp kindly lets you be shadow for a moment. Your hand finds your coat, then the wall, then the air. All three are friends. All three agree to carry you home as if you were a well-folded letter addressed to a quiet room. Night settles as though it had been waiting on the stair, patient, holding its hat, learning the names of your rooms by listening. You move through them slowly, not to be careful, only to be exact. A chair returns to its corner and finds it still fits. A cup is rinsed and left to dry. The rim keeps the moon's small idea. A candle is encouraged once, and then encouraged no more. Its light chooses the table and leaves the ceiling to the dark. You let your hand rest along the back of the chair, along the table's edge, along the inside of your sleeve. Everything answers with the mildness of wood and cloth and the useful shadow they make together. Outside, the lane composes itself into narrower sentences, stone, drip, hush, then becomes a paragraph you need not read. The window shows less of the world and more of its own wavy glass. You admire the honesty. Breath becomes the only measure required. It goes out, it comes in, the room improves. You think of stairs and bridges, of chalk lines and chess squares, of cups and coins, and the small country between thumb and thumb, where yes can live without talking. All of it folds like linen. All of it agrees to be put away for tomorrow. When you lie down, the bed behaves as if it has been told a good story. The pillow keeps a sensible coolness. Your hands, suddenly unimportant, Choose their places without instruction, one anchored near the ribs, one adrift near the edge of the sheet, like boats that have understood the harbor. Breath deepens. The last useful thought bows and retires. The room takes up its watch, unarmed and sufficient. You fall through the quiet with the lightness of someone expected and the steadiness of someone met at the door by name. We hope this glimpse into old customs has been a calm and pleasant one. If it made you curious for more, you can like, share, or leave a kind comment. And if you wish, subscribe to be here for the next unhurried tradition we explore together. End of script. Sweet dreams.